Over the past 6 months, I've had the pleasure of playing through one of the best franchises to ever grace the gaming industry, and while it's been an extremely fun time, it wasn't always a pleasant one. Wait, what the fuck? When we're trying to find the answer to a question that stumped even the greatest of minds though, some pain should be expected. What question's that, you ask? Well, for transparency's sake, this video is a compilation of my 2 previous ones with the addition of Rift Apart, so if you have seen either of those parts, feel free to use the timestamps to skip to the section that you haven't seen. For the rest of you poor bastards that have somehow ended up here for the first time, all I can say is just try and enjoy yourselves. I can guarantee you that within 10 minutes, you'll want to be anywhere but here. In a galaxy far, far away. Oh, never mind. On a planet nearby, a factory seems to be developing an army of absolute chads, only to then shit itself and poop out an absolute legend. Unfortunately for him, an 8-foot height requirement is mandatory at this factory, and, well, he's fucking tiny. In hopes of escaping, he hijacks a ship only to be completely outplayed in aerial combat. His lack of combat experience ultimately leads to a crash landing on a planet called Veldin, and it just so happens that we've been patiently waiting for something like this to happen. Now, as is the case with any game, this first planet acts as a tutorial stage, allowing us to learn the countless moves at Ratchet's disposal. Our weapon of choice is the Omni Wrench 8000, and apart from swinging it normally to obliterate our foes, we can also throw it, which as a skill is something I never once used following this clip. This beastly wrench has no problem dealing with these, horny toads. Wait, what? We're also equipped with the Bomb Glove, which conveniently enough, completely outranges the electroids and their pathetic excuse for an attack. If that wasn't sad enough, these literal bots don't even take into consideration friendly fire. After thoroughly decimating our opposition and amassing a small fortune of bolts, we eventually stumble across our soon-to-be slave. Now, despite his critical condition, Clank couldn't help but wake up after smelling what could only be described as literal horseshit. Foul odors aside, Clank warns us of the impending doom our solar system faces at the hands of Chairman Drac, or as my dumbass like to call him. Bro, who does this guy remind me of? He looks like, wait, Pot of Greed, no? His head looks like Pot of Greed. I'd been playing for barely 10 minutes at this point, yet I could tell just based on the dialogue alone that I was going to thoroughly enjoy this game.
Hello, citizens of...
Wait, what? He doesn't know how to pronounce that? What the fuck? With the fate of the whole solar system on our shoulders, we strike a deal with Clank, which sees our years of hard work finally bear fruit, as we can finally start our beloved ship and experience a whole new world.
2 seconds later.
Wait, the game just ends like that? As eventful as Veldin was, Novalis acts as the first real stage of the game, featuring multiple objectives and routes for us to explore. Now, you'd expect an introductory level like this to be fairly easy, and for the most part, it was. The enemies don't pose much of a threat as we still outrange them, and the platforming is rudimentary at best, with no real risk of dying should you fail the jumps. Ratchet is also able to swim, which was a miraculous discovery considering how his fellow PlayStation mascots usually react to water. That being said, there was one colossal roadblock that stood in my way, and while it wasn't immediately obvious, when it hit, it hit. Okay, Insomniac, wait, what? Wait, this is fucking banging. Holy shit, how am I supposed to fucking finish the level? I don't want to. Blazing aside, there's quite a few things introduced on Novalis. There's the Gadgetron vendors, which we'll be using to buy most of our weapons, as well as the obscure golden bolts. These bolts in particular are one of the main collectibles we'll need to look out for when going for 100%. Alongside this, we'll need to complete 30 skill points and upgrade 10 weapons to their gold variants. While the large majority of these gold bolts and skill points can be collected during our initial visit, others often require a specific weapon or gadget in order to collect them, meaning we'll have to return to a lot of planets at a later point. Regardless, after dealing with a few more bird bots, we torture Agnok Buckwash, is that really his name, into letting us use his courier ship. Our next destination, planet Iridia. Now, if I'm being honest, coming to this planet first was a rookie error, mainly due to the fact that we need a particular gadget in order to complete one of its main objectives. Alright, what in the fuck is a swing shot? Even so, I got to scope out the area and it dawned on me just how powerful certain weapons are against particular enemies. See, we'd purchased the Pyrosighter back on Novalis, but considering how effective the Bomb Glove was, I hadn't thought to use it yet. The moment I came across these Sand Sharks though, I just knew I had to whip this flaming hot weapon out of my arse to deal with them. See, while these small critters die in one hit to our Omni Wrench, the sheer number of them often overwhelm you, making melee combat extremely dangerous. Having helped skid McMarks, which I've only just realised is quite a humorous name, we make our way back to the thriving city of Metropolis. Upon arriving, we buy the blaster and make our way towards Owl's Robo Shack. Along the way, we're hassled by some rude dog owners who we unfortunately had to put down. Eventually we meet with Owl, and despite his ludicrous prices, he equips Clank with one of the most practical upgrades in the game, the Helipack. With it, we're able to perform a high jump as well as a long jump. We're also able to do this. Can I get to this or like what? Oh fuck. Now, as brain dead as that play was, it still counts as our first official death, and trust me when I say that it most definitely won't be our last.
Well, duh.
Unfortunately, we'll have to put our long jump dreams behind us as we've got more pressing matters to attend to. The obstacle course here teaches us a few more fundamental movement abilities like wall jumping, but all things considered, it's a fairly tame section as again, there's no real risk of dying should you fail a jump. What I will say is that the golden bolts hidden in these levels are anything but simple. I mean, just look at what you have to do to get this one. How on the fuck is anyone supposed to find that without help? What? Upon completing the obstacle course, we meet with Helga, who, well, I'll just let Ratchet say it.
When I was competing, I would devour courses like that for breakfast.
Bet that's not all.
Before leaving Metropolis, I engaged in some thrill seeking by launching myself off the nearest bridge, and while this might come across as a final cry for help, in reality it was a strategic gliding section down towards another golden bolt. With a swing shot in hand and a good few minutes of gliding experience under our belt, I returned to Aridia, where we dominated the obstacle course. With my ego at an all-time high, it was only right that I'd find myself sinking into a lake of human feces moments later. To my surprise though, it seemed as though Ratchet had taken a liking to this feeling, as he continued to dive face first into literal shit. Now, in reality, I needed to get onto this small island as the final gold bolt was resting in the back of a particular truck. Not wanting to embarrass myself further, I looked to reach it from another platform, and thankfully enough, there seemed to be one towards the end of the stage. One simple long jump was all it took, and we had ourselves another golden bolt. Our next objective saw us travelling to Eudora, where I was once again stun-locked by some ridiculously funky tunes. The planet itself isn't too much of a step up in terms of difficulty though. The enemies still die relatively fast and our weapons are only getting better. We pick up the Glove of Doom here, and I've got to say, it quickly became one of my favourites. Like, what do you mean? You can literally throw these bad boys around the corner and then watch as your little bombs crawl their way up their assholes. Safe to say, I was feeling quite confident at this point, which ultimately led to me saying something I'd soon come to regret. I wonder why they give you 4 hit points. I feel like it's too many, no? Now, despite these enemies having the lethality of a fur-coated tadpole, there's no knowing when I'll look to humble myself. Oh, I can't believe I just fucking did that. After having attended a few therapy sessions to get over the lack of checkpoints present, we eventually stumble across Pot of Greed's henchman, and upon seeing Clank's marvelous karate skills, he promptly shits himself before running off. Despite the foul odor oozing from this infobot, the jobs advertised were somehow even worse.
Mutant animal husbandry.
That said, money's money, and before I knew it, we were making our way towards Nebula G34. To my surprise, this space station is where the game starts to up the ante in terms of its difficulty. Sure, you've got these toad-looking motherfuckers that are easy enough to deal with, but the true horrors lie in these snapper freaks who get their very own introductory cutscene. What makes these guys so terrifying, apart from looking like your typical Australian wildlife, is the fact that they attack straight after being hit. This isn't exactly lethal on its own, but when you've got numerous toads swarming you at the same time, it can get pretty AIDS. Okay, maybe 4 health isn't enough. Upon taking my first combat L, I immediately shelled up and played like an absolute pussy, spamming Glove of Doom shots until this cancerous room was fully cleared out. To my horror, however, we soon came face to face with the leader of these snappers. But as intimidating as she looks, she was a complete joke to fight. Her attacks are extremely slow and easy to avoid, and while she does birth multiple babies throughout the fight, somehow, using our god tier kiting skills, we were able to take her down with ease. Following her defeat, we pay a premium for some grind boots, spend an embarrassing amount of time hacking this door, and float out into space in our first Clank segment. Now, if you're like me, you'd most likely come into this switch up with your eyes beaming with anticipation, only to then be extremely disappointed with how boring these segments actually are. Clank can punch, he can glide with his propeller, and yeah, that's about it. We do eventually get access to some yes men, but again, we're essentially just ordering them around while we slowly waste away from inactivity. Thankfully, these feelings of apathy were short-lived as we found ourselves dashing our way out of the Blage warship. Don't ask me how we got into this situation, I wouldn't be able to tell you. Having barely escaped the exploding warship, we learn of an orgy happening down on Rilgar. Unfortunately though, it seems the participants can only shoot blanks, meaning they had to be put out of their misery. Reveling in the fact that we're not shooting blanks ourselves, we were immediately humbled by the price of the Rhino. With this realization in mind, we cleared our way through the city in the hopes of finding our big breakthrough. Eventually, we stumble across an opportunity, which sees us participating in our first hoverboard race. This was the breakthrough we needed. If we could just place first, then all of our problems would... To win these races, you've essentially got to hit every speed boost, which isn't exactly the hardest thing to do. Yeah, I know. This coming from the guy who ran face first into multiple explosive crates. By some miracle though, we were able to tap into the skills of past hoverboard legends, and using them, we completely dominated our second race. This was no time for self-glazing though, as moments later, I found myself in quite possibly the worst scenario one could ever find themselves in.
Shit! Fuck me!
And it wasn't obvious at the time, but this small backstep at the beginning well and truly fucked any chance I'd make it through this section alive. The water rises at such a rate that it's incredibly important that we make no platforming mistakes while running through this area. Even with a few long jumps, we still barely managed to avoid needing CPR from this hunk. Either way, we finally meet with Captain Quark, who might have the shittiest trailer out of any celebrity. Quark tells us to meet him at his headquarters, which is an interesting name for what is essentially a death course. Luckily for us, Insomniac had absolutely no faith in its players' ability to aim, equipping most guns with their very own auto-aim feature. This paired with our god-given talent of standing completely still, meant that we were able to clear our way through this so-called gauntlet without much trouble. Having made our way to Quark, we once again confirm our lukewarm IQ as we fall for the baitest trap to ever exist.
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
Being the coward that he is though, Quark scurries away leaving us to deal with this monstrosity instead. Appearances aside, this boss is pretty useless. For whatever reason, he can't seem to wrap his head around putting one foot in front of the other, and instead stays stationary like a complete idiot. This makes his attacks extremely easy to dodge, and while he's got a lethal fireball attack, the only time he'll ever use it is if you're looking to spank his cheeks from melee range. With another boss behind us, we're promptly blackmailed into doing some charity work on planet Battalia. That said, the dangers present here certainly warrant a fat paycheck. I mean, just look at what we've got to deal with. We've got circus rejects doing goddamn flips, stealth bombers that dive face first into plants the moment you get close to them, as well as whole ass tanks that have about as much range as any dude throwing a ball with their non-dominant hand. This place also has its very own ride. It's just a shame that someone loaded it up with explosive mines. This was also the first skill point that I'd earned, which we got for completing this whole grind segment without taking any damage. We'll get into these skill points a bit later. For now, we just purchased the info bot of this failure and made our way towards Gaspar. This planet by far has some of the most annoying enemies yet. Not only do we have these somersaulting tryhards from before, but we've now got to deal with these floating testicles. Known scientifically as seekers, these motherfuckers had me seeking a hospital as I found myself diving out of buildings as they exploded within an inch of my butt cheeks. My sketchy interactions with these bastards had left me with 2 nanotech hits, which wasn't ideal as I found myself getting absolutely ravaged by the whole circus troupe. Ironically enough though, I was the true clown in this situation, as I'd forgotten how non-existent certain checkpoints were. Our return visit saw us mimicking Neo as we dodged every bullet to make it into this turret. Using it, we were able to retire these washed up gymnasts, and before long we'd collected the pilot's helmet. Before making our way to what I considered to be one of the shittiest planets ever.
No, God!
We glided down into this gaping hole in the hopes of finding another golden bolt. What awaited us, however, was a masochist's wet dream. I'm talking flipping bros, countless munchers trying to get a piece of that ass, and of course, the lovely seekers. I'd taken, like 23 steps into this cave system and I was already down to my last life. As you can imagine, this meant we had to plan our next steps accordingly, especially when you realize that the enemies in our path are doing backflips in and out of cover. Thankfully, I'm an absolute rat in these situations, and after abusing the ever-living hell out of the Glove of Doom, I was able to collect another golden bolt. Not wanting to lose our momentum, I decided we should grab the second golden bolt while we were at it, and this one in comparison is a complete joke.
So that was a fucking lie.
In all seriousness though, this pathway is more of a platforming challenge, and there's no real threat when it comes to the enemies. Having stalled for as long as possible, we're forced to Orxon, which is quite possibly the worst planet in the entire game. It's so bad in fact, that Ratchet refuses to get out of the ship, meaning we'll have to play as Clank for the first few segments. These segments aren't hard in the slightest. In fact, the only challenging part is trying to stay awake as you slowly waddle your way through the endless hallways with your robotic yes men. Losing even a single bot means traveling back to collect them, giving you ample time to consider how the fuck you let that happen. Towards the end, Clank stumbles across a rather sus infobot, and despite his request, focused is the last thing we'll be. By the time I'd made it to Pokitaru, even the game had given up on me. Scenic sewers? Well, that can't be right. The good news is that the enemies here are extremely easy to deal with. I mean, you'd have to be utter dog shit to die to these fish. As a wise man once said, every mistake is a lesson, and that couldn't be more true. In the few moments following this death, I'd concocted an idea so astonishing that I might just be a genius. Now, you're probably wondering what that idea entailed. Well, what if I told you we could suck these fish up, and then blow them back out as our own rockets? I mean, well, that's gotta be up there with like, what, discovering the laws of gravity or something, surely. Speaking of scientific breakthroughs, after sucking our way through the streets of Pokitaru, we stumble across Owl's brother, who offers to install a thruster pack onto Clank, and using it we gain access to our very own fighter jet. Now, despite never having undergone any pilot training, we're able to blitz our way through these floating ball sacks, earning us the O2 mask. Unfortunately, this meant we'd be back to contracting AIDS on Orxon, this time though, as Ratchet. Now, as concerning as that statement sounds, contracting AIDS was the least of our problems. With an AQI of over 500, it didn't take long for the local wildlife here to get infected, morphing them into some of the most cancerous creatures about. Let's just put it this way, I think I'd rather confess my love to a complete stranger in public than fight my way through this clusterfuck of toxic crabs again. That said, I did manage to reach the Juggernaut machine at the end of the path without dying. As any zombie vet would know, this perk helps beef us up, allowing us to tank another hit going forward, only for the next planet to say fuck your extra health. Wait, we die in one hit? Hoven was like my kryptonite, and it had nothing to do with the enemies present. If you've seen any other video of mine, you'll know how much I hate ice-based physics in games, especially when it takes Ratchet 87 business days to stop sliding. Things somehow got even worse though, as I came across what could only be described as the gateway to hell. Nah, you gotta be taking the fucking piss with this. What is that? As you can probably guess, the few attempts to follow were anything but enjoyable. The worst part is the fact that you go from slippery as fuck to the normal on this tiny ass platform, then back to slippery. It just completely fucks your momentum. With a few extra deaths to our name, we finally make it to the other side, where I had but one question. Wait, how in the fuck did this unit slide across that thin ass pathway? No fucking shot. He hands us some crack, which we immediately take back to this recovering addict in the Jowai resort. He hands us the Persuader, which is
an illegal black market device.
As future heroes of the galaxy though, there's no way we take advantage of such a shady device.
2 seconds later.
Yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, probably that as well. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, we witness the absolute assassination of one's aura.
I'm too washed up for ground combat? True.
God damn, he doubled down. Being the rats that we are, there was no way we were going to miss this opportunity to put Quark out of his misery, and after some rather questionable missile flying, we finally came face to face with Quark once again. Realizing he'd stand no chance against us in hand-to-hand combat, he summons a whole-ass Millennium Falcon out of his ass and does his best to run away. Unfortunately for him, the plot requires that he gets his ass beat, and after sending a good few missiles directly up it, we're rewarded with yet another hellhole to traverse through. The level design of Atlantis confirmed a suspicion I'd been having for a while. There were definitely some sadistic fucks at Insomniac Games. Who in their right mind thought it'd be a good idea to combine the slippery movement of Hoven with gale force winds and enemies that could blitz your ass from the next galaxy over with their range? Even the normal platforms have a fuck ton of enemies on them, most of which aren't even sentient. Oh, well isn't that just fucking great? The pain didn't stop there either, as the final gold bolt had us swing-shotting our way through the local neighborhood. It soon became apparent, however, that we weren't bitten by a radioactive spider.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
With our sanity at an all-time low, there was only one thing that could help us: roids. Using our new beefed up body, we absolutely railed through some goofy looking mechs before making our way to Kalebo 3. It's a mystery what happened to Kalebo 1 and 2, but what I do know is that it only took about 3 seconds before I started to cheese kill these elite guards. This city also houses the second hoverboard race, and if there's one thing I learnt from our first one, it's that I had no chance of winning this on my first attempt.
Wait, what? Why is Ratchet falling on his ass there? Wait, nothing even happened.
I did manage to secure victory the second time around, only to get blown to shit on the grind rails when going for another golden bolt. To my horror, our pathetic skills didn't go unnoticed, as we're once again humbled at the sight of Clank securing another baddie for himself.
I'll see you later.
Bye, sweetie.
I think she likes me.
With the hologuise now in our possession, we were able to sneak our way into the secure area on Quartu. Eventually we reached the same shitbox from the opening cutscene, only to find out it's Clank's mum.
Mom?
Brother.
I tried, Mom.
Despite having witnessed our only friend being disowned by his own family, all we really cared about was Pothead's plan to annihilate our home planet. With our blood absolutely boiling, it was about time we ended this charade. And by charade, I meant our own life. Drek's fleet for the most part wasn't too challenging. I did however find myself in quite the predicament, as I was left on one hit with a gold bolt teasing me across a bunch of lasers. Past videos would have you think that I don't do well under pressure, but I'm a changed man. And after a 4-hour decompression session, I finally had the balls to attempt this long jump.
Oof. Jesus Christ, didn't doubt myself for a single second.
With my confidence restored, I looked to confront Pot of Greed, who'd used those 4 hours to Uber himself down to Velden. Before following suit, however, I wanted to make sure that we'd collected every golden bolt and skill point first. This saw us travelling back to planets like Novalis and Quartu. The large majority of these gold bolts were easy enough to collect, although there were a good few that really tested my patience. The skill points followed a similar trend, with some being laughably easy, and others mimicking the feeling of getting fisted. I mean, not that I'd know. The hoverboard races were, without question, the toughest obstacle in my course for skill point perfection. The first one requires us to finish the race in under 1 minute 35 seconds, which frankly speaking, seemed impossible at first. I had raced multiple times without missing a single speed boost, and still, I hadn't come close to that 135 barrier. Our prospects had never looked so bleak, and after another few attempts, I really started to doubt if this shit was even possible. That's when it happened. A once in a lifetime attempt. I was hitting all the shortcuts, all the speed boost. This was it. I was finally going to break that back.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Dude, what do you need to do?
Joking aside, we needed to abuse the jump feature on the hoverboard, which allowed us to skip larger parts of the track. Doing so consistently every lap gave us just enough leeway to clear that 135 barrier. This was no time to celebrate though, as this skill point had its very own toxic cousin waiting for us on Kalebo 3. Instead of a time limit though, this motherfucker required us to score over 4,500 points before the end of its race. Points are scored by doing tricks on your hoverboard. The more tricks you string together at once, the more points you get. Now luckily for my mental state, this one wasn't nearly as bad, although we did end up with multiple concussions attempting this. Outside of those 2 skill points though, the rest of them were fairly simple, and upon collecting our last one, it was time to shatter this pot of greed. Before doing so, however, I made sure to collect our last skill point, which saw us wrench slamming 10 of these elite guards. While this may sound annoying, their position in the air meant we'd have direct access to their nutsack, resulting in some devastating vasectomies. The rest of the planet was then cleared out using a combination of Visibomb cheese and sucking. It appears hand-to-hand combat is no one's strong suit in this galaxy, as our final showdown with Pot of Greed sees us facing off against a massive mech. After taking a few fire waves to the anus, we downloaded his attack patterns and proceeded to start walloping his non-existent booty. With how smoothly this first attempt was going, it was only a matter of time before some bullshit fucking struck us from above. Not realizing we had the power to phase through literal rocks, we made sure to stay away from the edges of the arena as we face tanked our way to victory. With the Pot of Greed shattered, we let our intrusive thoughts win as we launch one final strike towards a planet that looks eerily similar to Earth, thus ending not only the game, but our lives. I'm only kidding. Plot armor is real, and it's the reason we've been able to clear the game despite dying over 30 times. That said, we weren't done just yet. See, the moment you complete a Ratchet and Clank game, you're teased with Challenge Mode, a new game plus file that lets you keep all your weapons, bolts, and certain gadgets. Now, despite its daunting name, I don't believe Challenge Mode adds any, well, challenge. The enemies remain the exact same, which is kind of strange considering we gain access to the gold variants of 10 weapons. As you can imagine, these pricey upgrades make for a much stronger arsenal, and using them we're able to blitz our way through challenge mode without much struggle. I'd actually started the game for a third time just to earn enough bolts for the Rhino, which stupidly enough was the last weapon I unlocked to 100% the game. Now believe it or not, I'd only died a few times when replaying the campaign. Most of them were, well, you know what caused them. Alas, we'd saved the galaxy twice at this point, and it only cost us 35 deaths, which is downright pathetic if we're being honest. There's no way we're going to get bodied that many times in the following games, right? Going Commando picks up directly after its predecessor, yet despite our heroic deeds in the previous game, we couldn't be more washed up.
I guess no one needs a hero right now.
Considering how successful the first game was, however, Insomniac knew they needed to whip something out of their asses, and as sad as it is to say, begging for relevancy online seems to work just as well in this fictional galaxy as it does in our own, as we're immediately tasked with yet another life-threatening mission. Following a brutal 2-week bootcamp which has us learning things we'll never actually use, we're thrown into yet another introductory stage where I immediately creamed myself at just how much better this game felt. The absolute legends at Insomniac Games had somehow managed to craft a lock-on system that actually, well, locked on.
Impossible!
This made clearing these initial enemies laughably easy, and before long, we'd come face to face with a villain that'd give my autistic ass a good run for its money.
Finish him.
As braindead as this display was, it did manage to stunlock us, allowing the thief to escape with the galaxy's first Furby. Shout out to those who know what that is. Wanting nothing more than to possess this cute furball for ourselves, we annihilate the remaining cannon fodder before following in hot pursuit. As we neared the next planet though, it became clear that we'd put in the wrong destination on our Maps app.
And I have no idea where he was headed.
Even so, a faint cry for help was all that was needed to get us running our way through these swamplands, and while the tentacle-equipped snails triggered my PTSD, we did eventually come to the rescue of this poor scientist.
Wow. Well, fuck you too then.
Realizing this was an elaborate game of hide and seek, we continuously followed the agonizing cries of death until we came across our first boss fight. It's also around this point where the game highlights one of the best additions to the entire franchise, strafing. Now this feature was technically in the first game as well, but instead of being a benefit to the player, this shit was so arse that it essentially sent you back to the last checkpoint the moment you tried using it.
Well, this sucks.
In Going Commando, however, this feature has been drastically improved, now allowing us to pull off dodges even Neo would be proud of. With these god-given abilities bestowed upon us, we ride these admittedly horrifying creatures across this lake of piss, spy the tractor beam of the struggling alcoholic, and collect our first platinum bolt. Now despite having moved up in rank, these things are essentially the same as their golden counterparts from the original. Alongside these 40 bolts, we'll also need to obtain 30 skill points, max out our health and armor, complete every arena challenge, space mission, and hoverbike race, as well as upgrade all 24 weapons to their ultra tier. With a collection of things to do as long as your mother's shopping list, there was no time to waste, and after playing a few rounds of Star Fox, we arrived at a gambling addict's wet dream. That said, this was no time for gambling, as we had more pressing matters to attend to, like missing every possible shot on this slingshot.
What are you aiming at?
While we were busy making a universal fool out of ourselves, Clank was busy pulling baddies. Although this time around, it was in a more literal sense. Learning of our friend's capture was certainly concerning, yet this soon became an afterthought as our Lancer evolved into the Heavy Lancer. Now as exciting as this moment was, it was short-lived, as I realized that using this weapon at all after this point would be a colossal waste of time. If we were to have any hope of leveling each of these weapons to their ultra variants within our current lifespan, then we were going to have to cycle our way through each one the moment they were upgraded. The good news is that most of the weapons are extremely fun to use. The chopper, for example, made short work of the introductory arena challenges, while the blitzgun absolutely decimated every Jurassic Park reject in sight. Now as my ex would say about my friend downstairs, nothing's perfect, and the same could be said about a few of the game's weapons, but we'll get to the coma-inducing weapons later. For now, we just stuck with the fun yet ludicrous weapons.
Wait, a mini nuke? Yeah, right.
2 seconds later.
Holy fuck. Okay, they weren't joking.
With another 2 weapons upgraded, our short detour to the planet Barlow came to an end as we hadn't collected the necessary gadgets to proceed yet. Unfortunately, this meant we'd have to go back and rescue Clank, which was less than ideal. Fortunately, this wasn't the hardest task, and after getting thoroughly juked by this random bot, we'd come to Clank's rescue. To my surprise, the million bolts shot through Clank's butt cheeks hadn't short-circuited his operating system, meaning we still had access to our trusty thruster pack. Now, all things considered, I was feeling fairly confident at this point. Not only had we avoided death for this long, but with our weapons upgrading and our health bar only getting larger, I just couldn't see how this game could ever test us. That's when this B-Tech Thanos pulled up in his very own chopper gunner, and while I did manage to get through this fight without dying, it couldn't have been closer. I hadn't realized it at the time, but enemy attacks weren't limited to just 1 point of damage anymore. And as we'll come to see, this damage can get absolutely ridiculous.
Holy look at all this damage!
Regardless, with Thanos clapped once again, we're given some relaxation time, which we spent marveling another duo of legends. While here, we picked up our old swing shot and grind boots, meaning we could return to Barlow to partake in some Tarzan-esque swinging. Along the way, we came across a pen of endangered Gadgetron hounds of cuddly death, and after making sure they were well and truly extinct, we stumbled across yet another scientist. Despite his stature and IQ, this dumbass had somehow frozen himself, meaning we had to administer our very own gut-wrenching blow. Impressed with our problem-solving skills, the scientist offers to sell us his Terminator for a discount, which we humbly accept. Using it, we're able to turn unwanted water sections into an even worse substitute. Wait, what the fuck? Realizing we'd been scammed, I wasted no time in trying to earn a quick buck, which saw us taking part in our first hoverbike race. Now, unlike its predecessor, Going Commando has the common decency of teaching us the vehicle's controls before throwing us into a life-threatening situation. Whether or not this actually helped is besides the point. We trade out our hoverbike for another session of Star Fox gaming, and while I remember vividly thinking, what the fuck, how did we even get here? It was a rather relaxing experience overall. This is also the first instance in which we can choose to complete other space-based missions. Now, considering my aim mimicked that of a stormtrooper, I decided against attempting these missions at this point, as we'll be able to upgrade our spacecraft later on. Instead, we tracked a course for the planet Notark, only to get immediately judged by a fourth wall break.
We always seem to be a bit late. Why is that?
The game must have noticed that my ego was at an all-time high, as this planet truly started to up the difficulty. Not only do the enemies blend in perfectly with the numerous mannequins, the fact I was using the blitz cannon didn't help, as it meant I had to get close enough to smell their putrid BO. Safe to say, this was probably my most autistic endeavor yet, as I was quite literally trying to take out a flying ship with a fucking shotgun. Questionable decisions aside, I had somehow managed to make my way into the local aquatic center without dying. What I hadn't realized though was the fact that each pool came armed with its very own shark thing. With our death count losing its virginity, things were only going to get worse as we're gaslit by our very own sidekick.
And they are willing to show it to us for a small price.
6,000 bolts? Small price, my fucking ass.
We're then forced into the game's first snow planet. Yes, there's more than one. Now, as ominous as that statement sounds, this one isn't too bad. The enemies can't stand up to our minigun turrets and the platinum bolts are simple enough to collect. Before long we found ourselves on another train, and while the enemies here thrive on sneak attacks, we're no strangers to scummy tactics ourselves. This relaxing train ride ultimately leads us to Pound Town, but it's not us who's getting pounded, it's our masked friend here. Having dumpstered this absolute fraud, we rescued the abducted Furby, which was so awe-inspiring that Fizzwidget here couldn't contain himself.
Why, that's cutaneous! Absolutely munificent!
What?
Realizing the game would be far too overpriced if it ended here, Insomniac made sure we'd be ejected into a perfectly normal desert. Tabora is our first open-ended planet, where we're free to explore its vast wastelands. The main goal here is to collect these crystals, which isn't too bad as the enemies here, while massive in number, don't exactly do massive damage. There is a skill point linked to collecting all 100 crystals here, but with our mind solely focused on recapturing that Furby, this would have to wait. For now, we just grabbed 10 crystals as apparently that's all this crackhead needed to awaken his dormant powers. Not wanting to question what the fuck just happened, we glide our way down to a platinum bolt, winning multiple awards along the way. With a breakout performance like that, it was only right that we'd be considered amongst the galaxy's best gliders, a title we'd immediately lose as we continuously rammed our foreheads into a wall.
Fuck me, I'm just shit, aren't I?
Disappointed in our performance, we're required to pay off the maintenance bot's gambling debt, which put our remaining funds into life support.
This galaxy blows.
As if things couldn't get any worse though, we learned that Furby had gotten a taste for organic flesh. Feeling left out, Clank suggests we let the Furby have a little nibble of him, which all things considered was a terrible fucking idea. Realizing our partner had the IQ of a baked potato, we charted a course for the disposal facility in the hopes of getting rid of him once and for all. Unfortunately though, we were immediately cock-blocked by the true plot of this game, meaning we had to fight for our own life against the facility's defense systems. Now what I had thought to be an easy task soon turned out to be one of the most frustrating experiences yet. The task is rather straightforward. Destroy the 6 turrets before being blown to shit yourself. The problem though is that the moment you destroy any of these turrets, a bot is sent out to repair it. So I guess that means we'll have to destroy all 6 turrets within a short time span. This was easier said than done, as my unupgraded blasters were doing about as much damage as a wet noodle. There were numerous moments where I'd be blasting the final turret just to see that infuriating message pop up. If I wasn't losing out on time, I'd just be getting fisted by the turret itself. I wish I could tell you how many attempts this shit took, but saying it out loud would most likely end up in my family disowning me. To Dino on the other hand was a relatively relaxing experience. We didn't have any troubles cooking these rapid rats, and the colossal robots couldn't seem to deal with our scummy tactics. The only challenge offered here came in the form of these infiltrator hacking segments. Essentially, you're supposed to memorize the specific pathways that lead to the starting node. Idiots on the other hand will spend whole ass minutes brute forcing their way to victory.
Okay, I understand it now, Boom, 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 nope, boom, 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 nope, boom, 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 nope, boom, boom. Nah, for fuck's sake.
This was also the first planet where we used our new spider glove. It might not allow us to swing through the local neighborhood, but it can spawn a little mechanical spider which we can guide through these ventilation shafts. This leads to a small button which when stood on opens a hidden chamber that contains another platinum bolt. It's a good thing that this is a stupid little gadget and not a weapon we'll have to spend 80 years upgrading, right? Not wanting to dwell on that thought, we make our way to Boldan, where we get hit by almost every obstacle along this grind rail. This left us in quite the precarious situation, as we'd completed what would amount to fuck all on this planet. Not wanting to pad our death count, I did what any other pussy would do in our situation.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
Now this decision was so deplorable that it actually resulted in us being locked up. That said, with how many baddies Clank's pulled during his lifetime, it wouldn't faze me if at least one of them had ended up in prison themselves. Yep, there she is. Ignoring the fact that she was in for mass murder, we take this chance to sneak our way through the back rooms as Clank. These sections are never that hard, although going commando did spice them up by introducing new bots and synergies between them. Having freed ourselves from prison, we watch in confusion as our enemies throw themselves into the literal pits of hell. Unfazed, we grab our final wrench upgrade, show off our god tier platforming skills, and levitate our way to a familiar looking arse. As weird as it was to see this guy here, the more perplexing matter was how he thought anyone would buy this piece of shit for 20,000 bolts. I think I'd rather force myself to sit through one of my own videos before I'd ever buy this thing. Unfortunately, we will have to pick up this turd ball eventually, as it is required to hit 100%. For now though, our endless Amazon orders had left us completely broke, giving us the perfect excuse to avoid contaminating our hands. That said, being broke wasn't ideal, as we couldn't even afford a new set of clothes. Armor was another new addition added in Going Commando, and it's arguably the most important one when it comes to staying alive. That said, we must be closeted masochists, as we were still rocking the tetrafiber armor on one of the final planets. As you can imagine, every hit we took at this point felt like a supercharged kick to the nuts, yet even this paled in comparison to the pain suffered during our next boss fight. In the hopes of rescuing our tall Queen Angela, we're tasked with facing off against the Giganto mech, whose name, contrary to popular belief, has nothing to do with its size. Instead, this thing's a giganto waste of time, as we're forced to dash around this massive arena, jumping from turret to turret as we slowly whittle his HP down. I'd say this fight is one of the only misses in an otherwise legendary sequel. Now, despite having spent over 10 minutes fighting to rescue her, Angela rejects our confession of love, but assures us that it has nothing to do with our height difference. Heartbroken, we turn to drugs as our solace, only to realize they'd never been shipped. Confused, we fly our way on over to the shipping bay, only to find our nearly endless supply of crack gone. In their place were these goddamn snappers, and with 2 heads each, it was no wonder how our supply was cleared out at record speeds. Furious, we made sure to personally slip a spider up each of their nostrils as we cleared a path to multiple platinum bolts as well as our first hypnotic part. On our path to rediscover ourselves, we receive a video message from Angela. And would you look at that, it seems she needs rescuing once again. What she doesn't realize is that we're no simp. There's no way we'd fly all the way to another planet just to rescue. As embarrassing as this was, being a simp was the least of our worries. See, outside of rescuing Angela, our main goal on Grelbin was to amass a certain amount of moonstones, just like we had done on Tabora. The only difference was that these icy wastelands were inhabited by a seemingly endless supply of furries. Not only that, but the massive ice leviathans did more than half our total HP with a single hit from their beams, making them the most lethal enemies we'd encountered so far. Thankfully, we only needed to collect 9 moonstones to progress the story, meaning we could come back during challenge mode too.
No! God, please, no! No!
Safe to say, we were in for a colossal beating, as we got continuously fisted for 20 minutes straight. Getting gangbanged by Yetis was one thing, but what felt even worse was knowing that we'd been losing out on bolts the entire time. Whoever designed the stage was a true sadist, as they made sure that each of these Yetis would only drop like 60 bolts each. On the other hand, we'd have to spend at least double that in ammunition just to kill a single one, meaning our broke ass only got broker. While this experience completely fucked our death counter, it did make the following segments feel much easier in comparison, although the constant reminder of our financial situation certainly wasn't appreciated. In an attempt to accrue more bolts, we made our way back to the Mukhtar Resort, where we established ourselves as a dominant force in the arena challenges. Considering how strong we were at this point, none of these challenges were too difficult, and before long we jumbled together enough bolts to afford the Duraplate armor. Even with this armor though, I'd still shit myself at the thought of those Yetis, so instead we made our way to planet Damozel, which had apparently been overrun by Furbies. The resulting stage saw us cleaning up the streets, which did see quite a few honourable sacrifices being made. The level itself wasn't too bad though, as these small critters were extremely susceptible to being turned into sheep. The mech battle was just like any other, where we spammed our way to victory, and the grind rail segment was surprisingly easy with our new yes men clearing the way. Alas, everything must come to an end, and after reaching this park, we were once again reminded that we'd need to grab that final hypnotic puck from Grelbin eventually. Not wanting to spend any longer here than we had to, I made it my goal to blitz our way through these icelands, avoiding as many Yetis as possible. As you'd expect, we still got royally fucked doing this, but our new armor did help immensely in mitigating the damage taken. And while we did flirt with death quite a bit, we were able to trade in another 16 moonstones without adding too many deaths to our counter. With the hypnotic in our possession, it was about time we rescued Angela back on Grelbin, but because we're petty, I thought we'd finish up these space missions first. These challenges can be separated into a few different categories. You've got your standard elimination missions, unique one-off missions, and finally the race missions. The larger majority of these are extremely easy, that is until you get to the races. These missions have us competing in a race against the galaxy's ace pilot. The course itself is loosely outlined by these rings, and you don't even have to hit each one of them to win the challenge itself. The platinum bolts, on the other hand, require you to hit every single ring during those races, which was easier said than done. I assure you, I was sober when attempting these races, although I wouldn't blame you for thinking I downed 14 bottles of tequila beforehand. With another 10 deaths donated to the counter, we finished collecting every platinum bolt before making our way back to Tabora. Despite Angela's life hanging in the balance, we needed more bolts, and after another 20 minutes or so, we'd not only collected every single crystal, but another skill point as well. Now, considering we'd wasted close to an hour flying around like an inbred caterpillar, there was no guarantee that Angela was still alive. Even so, we trusted in the power of plot armor, and after fending off a final set of Furbies, we reunited with an unharmed Angela. She gives us the coordinates of the factory where they make these Furbies, and as tempting as raiding this factory was, there were still quite a few skill points we needed to collect. Now, most of these were fairly straightforward, like partaking in some animal cruelty or beating the shit out of the thug leader using only our fists. As you probably could have guessed, the only skill points I really struggled with were the vehicle races. Instead of flying through rings though, this time it was all about speed, which wouldn't have been too bad had I not been getting blown to shit by my opponents.
To break an opponent's lock on you, move your bike sharply to the left and right.
It took a few attempts, but we did finally earn ourselves the Speed Demon trophy, meaning we could move on to the Impossible challenge, which saw us battling through a grueling 60 rounds of AIDS. Now, all things considered, we were more than capable of doing this. The hardest part was conserving ammo, as there weren't too many ammo crates throughout the challenge. Even so, we did manage to complete this challenge on our first attempt, and by this point, there were only 4 skill points we didn't have. 3 of them were pretty standard, as we'd simply earned them while playing through challenge mode. The last one though, required us to mine every single moonstone on Grelbin, which wasn't going to fucking happen. At least not at the moment. With that said, it was about time we raided this Furby factory on Yeadil. By this point, we'd picked up Gucci's latest armor set, meaning the damage we took in this final planet was negligible. Saving the galaxy was one thing, but more importantly, we made sure not to miss the final platinum bolt, as this would earn us yet another trophy. Now, as surprising as Quark's reveal was, I couldn't help but be amazed at Angela's language following it.
Alright, just what the f is going on?
Quark, being the dumbass that he is, immediately gets himself eaten by this mutated Furby, and it looks like it's up to us to save the day once again. This final boss fight is more about attrition than anything else. The guy is incredibly tanky, and we were quickly running out of ammo on all of our guns. By the time we defeated him, I wasn't just on my final gun, but also my final health point. Holy shit. Not even close. A win's a win though, and following the removal of Quark's genitals, we're once again offered to play through the game in challenge mode. This was where the game truly flourished in my opinion. Not only do we gain access to the mega variants of all our weapons, but this iteration of challenge mode also introduces the bolt multiplier, which stacks up to 20 the more enemies that you kill. As you can imagine, this makes farming bolts extremely fun, although you do lose that multiplier anytime you're hit by an enemy. The enemies are also said to be far tougher in this mode. While I did feel like they did more damage, our beefy health bar and designer armor seemed to deflect a good chunk of it. Our main focus during this second playthrough though was to simply level each weapon to its ultra tier. This was fairly simple for most weapons, and we were able to upgrade most of them just by playing through the campaign again. Along the way, we maxed out our nanotech, fully upgraded our ship, and even collected every moonstone on Grelbin, which just so happened to be the only place I died on our second playthrough. The rematch against our Furby friend was also a complete cakewalk thanks to the Rhino 2, and we once again completed every space mission, arena challenge, and hoverbike race. All that remained for 100% was to upgrade one last weapon. The Spider-Bot glove was by far the worst weapon to upgrade. I spent what felt like fucking hours running the same spider up enemies' assholes. At some point, I realized I could just use other weapons to lower the HP before using the spider to finish them off, but I still felt like I'd rather be doing anything else than this shit. That said, we did eventually upgrade our glove to the Tankbot glove, which gave us our final skill point and multiple trophies. All that was left now was to pay a visit to the Insomniac Museum, which earned us the Platinum Trophy. He went commando. What started as a relaxing experience soon turned into a humbling one, as we died a total of 43 times while going for 100%. All that remains is to see how the final game in the trilogy holds up. I doubt it could be as hard as this was. Thankfully, it seems as though our galaxy-saving efforts didn't go unnoticed the second time around, as the game not only starts up in our very own penthouse, but Clank seems to have gotten his own TV series. Unfortunately for us though, we've somehow been shoehorned into the shitty reoccurring character role, who's neither relevant nor interesting enough for anyone to remember. Butthurt at the fact that a literal robot is getting more action than we are, we flick to the shittiest news service on air, which just so happens to be reporting the annihilation of our home planet. Now, if we're being honest, considering we are rich and famous now, we couldn't give less of a shit about this worthless planet, but realizing the alternative was having to watch another episode of Agent Clank, we immediately packed our bags and set out for Veldin. Upon landing, it became clear to us that these galactic rangers were getting their asses kicked. Fortunately for them though, we've got 2 whole games under our belt, meaning we had no problem decimating these alien motherfuckers. Before long, we were letting these dumbass rangers tank missiles for us as we dive bombed our way towards another battlefield. As is the case with most tutorial levels, the enemies here weren't too threatening. One thing I did notice was that our health had turned itself into a number, and to max it out, we'd have to raise it to 200. Alongside this, we'd have to collect 40 titanium bolts, 30 skill points, max out our armor, obtain all 15 in-game trophies, as well as upgrade all 20 weapons to their Omega tier. Waffling aside, we're humbled for the 81st time before getting information surrounding a supposed superhero.
Bro, I swear if this is Quark or something.
Legend tells that this
Oh, for fuck's sake, it is,
actually
man.
one of the greatest superheroes who ever lived.
Stop the cap.
Either way, with nothing else to go off, we chart a course for Florana, where we pick up one of the coolest weapons to ever grace the franchise. Florana introduces a few new things, mainly the Bolt Multiplier crate as well as the new Inferno mode. The Bolt Multiplier crate doubles our current multiplier, while Inferno mode makes it so we can take a nuclear missile straight to the crotch without feeling a thing. Now, as powerful as that sounds, I hardly ever use this mode, as it seemed to be a surefire way of never leveling any of our weapons. What I will say is that this is a far more exciting first planet than its predecessors, and while the enemies were getting fucking shit on, their attack patterns and numbers did keep me on my toes. My cocky attitude soon caught up to me though, as we're tasked with finding our way through the path of death. And as corny as that name sounds, it wasn't lying, as I died in what may go down as the most brain dead way possible.
Oh, fuck me. No, I'm lagging.
The rest of the path didn't pose much of a problem, which could also be said about this washed up hero. One look at this guy and it became obvious that his genitals weren't the only things removed at the end of going commando, as this doofus couldn't even understand a thing we were saying. With Quark's cheeks well and truly clapped, we get a call from our new crush who tells us that should we let Quark continue to think that he's a monkey, it would be an utter disgrace to their entire species. Having watched Planet of the Apes, we decided it would be for the best to get this failure back in semi-working order, which ultimately saw us docking at the Starship Phoenix. This is the first time one of these games has had its own little base of operations, and as you can tell from the map screen, there's quite a few rooms for us to explore. For now, we let Quark get comfortable in his new cell before testing out the VR deck, which are essentially just easier arena challenges disguised as VR tests. Eventually, we end up on the bridge where we first lay eyes on this devious mastermind.
Robotic citizens of the Solana Galaxy, the hour of your liberation is at hand!
Convinced this was yet another fraud wearing a villain skin, we touched down in Marcadia, which just so happened to be the first planet to feature enemies that had respectable range. Even so, we're elite heroes at this point, and after collecting our first titanium bolt, we linked back up with the Galactic Rangers. Realizing they were in the presence of Clank's personal chauffeur, the Rangers couldn't help but beg for our help in securing the area, and while I was hesitant at first, one look at the prize fund had me completing not one, not two, but all 5 additional challenges. These operations ranged in difficulty from extremely easy to still pretty easy. Most of them just had us holding the line for a certain amount of time, or until a certain number of waves had been cleared, and while I did worry about my ammo reserves a few times, none of them lasted long enough to truly cause us any problems. In what can only be described as a sick joke at this point, we were immediately humbled yet again by the president, who immediately sucks off Clank's non-existent dick, all while telling us we've got zero chance with his daughter.
Don't get any ideas, kid, she is way out of your league.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Worst yet, but this guy seems to think that Quark is the key to defeating Dr. Nefarious. It's a real wonder how he ever became president in the first place. Either way, before returning to the Starship Phoenix, there's one last area we can check out. Now, despite being called the Laser Defense Facility, it's done an awful job of defending itself, as this place was crawling with Monster Inc. rejects. The good news is that these are the exact same enemies we've been plastering throughout the early game, meaning they didn't put up much of a fight here either. Having maxed out our brain power to solve these Olympiad-tiered puzzles, we meet with Al, who gives us our first Quark vid comic. These comics act as short 2D platformer levels in which we play as Quark in somewhat questionable scenarios. This first volume isn't too tough, but with only 5 hits allowed, it can get pretty dicey at times. There are also 100 Quark tokens for us to collect, and doing so will reward us with a titanium bolt, so it's important that we keep our eyes peeled, as there are usually a good few that are well hidden within each stage. Now, the downside of playing through this comic was that it helped spark a lightbulb moment in Quark's head, and within moments, he was back to being the king of cringe.
Well, who's that handsome devil?
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
Not wanting to be anywhere near him, we make a getaway for the Annihilation Nation, which, true to its name, immediately annihilated any aura we had.
He hopes that disguising himself as a Tyrannoid will make him more attractive to the lady.
With our ego well and truly decimated, we'd have to pick ourselves up as we had a rather treacherous obstacle course to get through. Along the way, we snagged yet another titanium bolt before finding ourselves in our first combat arena. Here we had to fight through multiple waves of enemies, which wasn't too bad as there were plenty of ammo crates that spawned throughout the gauntlet. And despite winning it all, it was becoming increasingly obvious that we were now the galaxy's punching bag.
How about that, folks? He is better looking.
With a fire well and truly lit under our asses, we look to assert our dominance by completing as many arena challenges as possible. Now, for the most part, we were smashing our way through these, although there was one that was quite frankly impossible for us to complete at this stage.
Weapons now. Oh, I just lose.
With the dream of a deathless run shattered, we returned to the Starship Phoenix where we were jump scared by what could be considered the worst superhero squad to ever exist. Nicknamed the Q-Force, this questionable bunch may as well have been spectators, as we're the ones that have to do everything. Before we dive into what could be considered our first suicidal mission, we decide to blow off some steam by playing through our second volume of Quark's vidcomic series. This volume was in fact a bit harder than the first one, as it featured more timed segments and moving platforms. It also had some well hidden tokens, as it took me 2 attempts to find them all. That said, we'd stalled for long enough, and after picking up our first set of armor, we dove down to a Quatos. Now, outside of the possibility of seeing Aquaman down here, there really wasn't too much to this planet. The enemies were easy enough to deal with, and the pathways being linear made it easy enough to spot the titanium bolts. That said, this was the first time I'd seen enemies who could literally phase out of existence.
What the fuck?
biggest surprise though was finding out about Slim Cognito's dark past.
I had a small run-in with the cops concerning a suck cannon upgrade that was mistakenly sold to a miner.
What the fuck? Bro, I can't believe what I've just heard. It's Slim Diddy.
Disgusted by his actions, we refused to pay a single bolt for his weapons and instead looked to infiltrate Dr. Nefarious' underwater base. This acts as our first Clank segment, and this time we've got our very own sidekick in the form of, well, this guy. While Clank sends Scrunch off to die, Ratchet seems to be suffering from food poisoning as he can't stop burping while trying to speak to these guards. Amazingly though, we were able to fool these idiots into thinking we spoke fluent Taiwanese. And just like that, we'd infiltrated Dr. Nefarious' office. Now while we didn't find much in relation to what his evil plans were, we did discover that he was a massive fan of Agent Clank, as well as his, well, let's just say unique kinks.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
With so much on our minds, it's a good thing we spent the next 18 business days dropping into who knows what. Having entered a short coma, we do eventually end up drifting down a stream of strange liquid, which we soon learn is...
This here is one of the nastiest, smelliest sewers in the galaxy.
In reality though, this is this game's iteration of Greblin, where we need to mine sewer crystals. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with Yetis anymore, and instead have a pretty relaxing time dusting off countless amoeboids. Not wanting to pass away from boredom though, I only cleared out the first segment of the sewers, which did earn us a nice chunk of bolts, which we immediately exchanged for a set of adamantine armor. This armor set couldn't have come at a better time, as our next mission saw us diving straight into enemy rocket fire once again. As thanks for the warm welcome, we made sure to return the favour. And return the favour we did, as we made our way around the island destroying each turret where it lay. We eventually end up facing off against another intern from Monsters Inc., and if nothing else, this guy was incredibly tanky. That said, he doesn't seem to know what the fuck he's supposed to be shooting at.
Nice.
Either way, with another threat eliminated, we waste no time gloating about our achievements only to get interrupted by Dr. Nefarious himself. Despite his best efforts to be intimidating, knowing what we do about his kinks certainly makes him seem less threatening. That said, we still had to track down the source of this transmission, which took us to a planet named Dax. This planet features a lot of long sightlines, which was perfect as we just purchased the Flux Rifle. This meant we could pick off enemies without them ever fighting back. Our journey to explore the docks was a bit more chaotic though, as we were constantly bombarded by this asshole in a fighter jet. Thankfully, we're given a chance to rinse his ass, and with only 2 attack patterns, this guy was going down easy. What wasn't easy, however, was the branching pathway that led to another titanium bolt.
Oh man.
For whatever reason, I couldn't seem to reach this platform on my first 2 attempts, although I did eventually grab this goddamn bolt. Following this, we completed a few Mario Galaxy levels, helped defend Blackwater City, and outplayed a brain-powered boss by throwing ourselves into the lava. This victory not only got us our 3rd core comic, but also a chance with Courtney Gears. All we had to do was not fumble it.
It is an honor for you to meet me. To meet you, Miss Gears. Hi. Hi.
Having confirmed a lack of any aura, we took in some of the best elevator music known to man, before making our way to Hollow-Star Studios, where things would go from bad to worse.
Take up basket weaving, you're fired!
With Ratchet experiencing the biggest fall-off in mascot history, it seems it was up to Clank to carry the rest of this game.
2 seconds later.
I have a present for you, Snooky Wookums.
Noticing that our partner hadn't returned for our daily viewing of Love Island, we vowed to find out what's happened, stopping for only the most crucial of things. On a more serious note though, this stage is the first to introduce the Noid Commanders, which are some of the toughest enemies in the entire game. They not only do incredible damage, but their fire rate and reload speed makes it extremely hard to get in and do damage to them, as it seems like they're always firing. Even so, after fighting our way through multiple commanders, we meet back up with Clank, who can't seem to stop judging us for some reason.
Bro, why is he looking at us like that?
Before we even get the chance to report anything though, we witness firsthand as Skidmark is battered for owning a piece of Courtney Gears merch. Wanting that limited edition shirt for ourselves, we fly our way on over to the most complex stage in the entire game. Joking aside, this is more of a platforming stage than anything else, as the enemies here are extremely basic. The hardest part is honestly just understanding how far you have to jump to avoid most of these obstacles. The boss fight against Courtney Gears in comparison is extremely underwhelming. I wasn't even sure what the fuck she was doing, as her backup dancers were just getting plastered by her endless mini turrets. Her own personal attacks were also incredibly easy to avoid, and as usual, after a few seconds with her, we were ready to wrap things up.
What do you mean by that?
Despite the easy fight, it didn't change the fact that Dr. Nefarious had a means of turning us into robots, and fearing for our lives, we turned towards the only one who'd allegedly beaten him, only to find out that he'd been sleeping with literal monkeys.
It was mating season. How could I have known she was your sister?
This was the last straw, and after trying to end ourselves, we fight off a bunch of Darth Maul impersonators before deciding to leave Quark for dead as we narrowly escaped the ship's explosion. With the weight lifted off our shoulders, we pretend to give a shit at his memorial before loading up the 4th volume of his comic series. It's here where we learn the true origin of the beef between Dr. Nefarious and Quark, and you won't believe it, but these guys have been fighting over who had the biggest head amongst them.
What did he say?
This reveal was so shocking that I had several brain aneurysms while playing through the comic, all of which cost me my life. Most of my deaths came while facing Dr. Nefarious himself, as he's got quite the range on his claws. That said, after another 3 deaths or so, I just figured you could spam punch your way to victory, which somehow worked. Having successfully figured out where Nefarious would strike next, we make our way to Metropolis, only to witness the Death Star turn every Tyrannoid into a robot. Considering we're standing right next to this particular one, it's anyone's guess how we didn't fall victim to its magical powers. Alas, with our organs still intact, we snipe our way through the courtyard, ultimately leading us to our first in-game trophy. These trophies are an interesting case, as half of them are found out in the wild, while others are earned by reaching certain milestones. We've definitely missed a good few of these, but with the fate of the galaxy in our hands, we couldn't afford to backtrack just yet. Now, in hindsight, this was probably the smart idea, as it didn't take long for us to get absolutely flattened by these new robotic commanders. The sheer number of these motherfuckers was honestly astounding, and to think they'd sneak up on us when we've got absolutely no cover to use. For the first time during this entire playthrough, we had to take things slow, as rushing into these fights would only fast track our name to the top of the Darwin Awards. After some methodical play, we reached our caged friend, but if we were going to have any chance of freeing him, we were going to have to deal with his roided up twin brother. Now, the big bright health bar in the bottom corner would have you think that this was a boss fight, but after a few shots to the forehead with the flux rifle, he was down for the count. After saving Clank, we make sure to rub in how much of a failure he is before helping the Galactic Rangers with another few operations. The final one rewards us with the Map-O-Matic, which we can use to see hidden paths on our map. With it, we're able to navigate these sewers, and while we didn't clear the whole area out, it did result in another nice chunk of bolts, which we once again used to buy the latest set of designer clothes. Started to the high heavens, we dropped down onto planet Zeldin, where we not only collected the easiest titanium bolt to ever exist, but we also looked to win the most brain-dead death award with this next play.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It appears the toxic radiation in those sewers had melted what little brain power I had left, as we spent the next 10 minutes spam blasting our way through our enemies. Eventually we stumbled across an escape pod that not only contained a recently used testicle scratcher, but a far more concerning recording.
Supernova tech.
Apart from the undeniable need for bleach, it was obvious that Quark had used his video to distract us. Not falling for it, we looked to blast our way through the remaining gravity section only to miss every conceivable shot on what may be the largest enemy in the entire game. Following this pathetic display, we're promptly banned from using any firearms until we complete the 5th and final chapter of Quark's comic series. Having initially thought this would be like every other volume, it soon became apparent that our dogship plays mimicked a more lore-accurate version of Quark. This comic was leagues above the rest in terms of difficulty. The fact that there was constantly rising acid means you hardly get any time to think, which makes collecting every token an even more stressful endeavour. Not only that, but the enemies seem to predict where you'll jump, meaning you'll oftentimes just jump straight into their torpedoes. I must have died at least 5 times while attempting to get this titanium bolt, but a win's a win, and with the final comic completed, it was high time we paid Quark a visit. Before we could get to him though, we had to fight our way through an army of Quark deepfakes, and seeing how creepy they looked as an exoskeleton, I was thankful they were fully clothed. Either way, Quark must have known we were coming. Either that, or he didn't want anyone to smell the putrid odour coming from his room, as he'd blocked it off entirely with a barrier. Now, as any dictator will tell you, sacrifices must be made for the greater good, so off Clank went deep into the underground caverns where he immediately iced himself out. Having cooled his head, we're able to use these skills we picked up when filming Agent Clank to destroy the barrier leading to Quark's bedroom. Surprisingly though, it seems the 48-page roast doc we'd prepared wasn't going to be needed, as Quark essentially told us that he was too much of a pussy to show his face in public anymore. This was the best news we'd heard in years, and running this high, we had no trouble taking out the Dark Sith's forces, as we powered our way to the bridge. Having confirmed everyone of importance was still alive and well, we headed off to Koros, which soon became our ideal farming spot. Now you'd think the penultimate planet would come with its fair share of tough enemies, but Insomniac is always 2 steps ahead. So instead, they just loaded this place with some absolute cannon fodder, both in the form of these brain-dead guards as well as these massive Gundam units that can't seem to shoot straight. With Dr. Nefarious' whole squadron obliterated, we gained access to the latest steel lab chair, which apparently came with its own turret. Now despite Clank's attempt to aura farm,
After all those hollow films, there is one thing you should know by now. Do not mess with Agent Clank.
We learned that Dr. Nefarious has an even larger base. Worse yet, it also had its own Death Star, meaning we weren't due for our Christmas break just yet. That said, there were still quite a few skill points and titanium bolts we had to obtain, so I guess saving the galaxy would have to wait for now. Much like their predecessor, these skill points ranged in difficulty from incredibly easy to making me want to dive bomb into an active volcano. Autistic plays were one thing, but the idea that we had to complete these goddamn core comics within a certain time frame shook me to my very core. In response, I just started running through them without a single thought entering my brain, and while this did work for the majority of them, it didn't exactly bode well for the final comic. Now despite being the self-proclaimed president of Quark's hate group, I had to admit that even I was getting sick of watching this bum die over and over again. Ironically enough though, the moment I had that thought was the exact moment I got that final skill point from these comics. The only other skill points to offer a challenge were some of the arena fights, mainly the ones that forced us to complete them without taking damage.
Oh my god, are you fucking serious? That just happened?
Whether it was bullshit like you just saw or blatant skill issues, this proved to be one of the few challenges that offered, well, a challenge. By this point, we'd collected every titanium bolt up until the last planet, and we'd obtained every skill point except for the one earned by buying the Infernox armor, which we couldn't afford. We'd also grabbed the last remaining in-game trophies, meaning the only ones we had left to collect were the ones that were awarded to us once we hit certain milestones. Now considering we'd spent a good few hours completing all these side objectives, it was a miracle that the whole galaxy hadn't been turned into robots yet. Even so, there was still a 2.1% chance it had happened, so off we went to Mylon where we picked up our final titanium bolt. Despite hearing rumors of a massive robot army guarding this command center, we must have come during their lunch break, as there was hardly a soul in sight. Regardless, it was apparent that Dr. Nefarious would be here, and after wiping the floor with his elite guard, it was only right that we'd do the same to him. Now as much as it pains me to say, but this guy was far tougher than I was expecting. Sure, he doesn't have that many attack patterns, but they are surprisingly quick, to the point where I almost fist bumped death on the first phase. I also didn't expect to have to fight through a few waves of enemies to reach his second phase, although this was one of the only moments where I could heal myself in peace. His second phase is where he really shines though, as he'll start to layer certain attacks on top of each other, making it even harder to avoid. That said, once we've seen them all, you'll have realized that you can pretty much avoid all of them just by running around the arena in a circle while strafing. He may be incredibly tanky, but we're no Captain Quark. Predicting his pathetic defeat, it seems as though Nefarious had one last ace up his sleeve. An ace that was entirely countered by strafing in one direction for 2 minutes.
Wait, is this how this boss ends?
Yep, it is. Anyway, with the goofiest yet best villain defeated, we finally got that Christmas break, which we spent making sure our partner's latest movie didn't flop completely. Unfortunately for the crew though, this Christmas break lasted for about as long as the credits, as we're immediately tempted into starting challenge mode. Naming conventions aside, the real challenge going forward was always going to be leveling each and every weapon to their Omega tier. That being said, with the Bolt Multiplier making a reappearance, it didn't take long for me to purchase the Infernox armor, awarding us with our final skill point. With our body now covered in solidified pizza toppings, it was only right that we blitzed our way through the second playthrough at record speeds. By the time we'd reached Mylon again, I'd essentially upgraded our entire arsenal, and I had done this using a very specific strategy. See, while I was running through Chorus during challenge mode, I came to realize just how many bolts we were getting just by destroying every local business in the site. Not only that, but these massive hunks of uselessness also gave a surprisingly large chunk of weapon XP, meaning we were not only leveling our weapons here, but we were getting rich while doing so. This planet became our new home for a good hour or two as I cycled my way through our entire arsenal until we had fully maxed out every weapon. This paired with us maxing out our nanotech from earlier had awarded us with every in-game trophy there was to get. Now technically this is all that's required for 100%, but because it was so easy to farm bolts in this game, I thought I might as well get the platinum trophy as well, which required us to amass a whopping 10 million bolts. Yet as daunting as that sounds, all it took was a few more runs through Chorus. Thus ends our 100% journey of up your arsenal, and with that, it's about time you ranked each of these games in terms of Wait, who the fuck is that?
Yeah,
So at first, I was just planning on covering the original trilogy, but as I said earlier, this series is often segregated into its own sagas, and Deadlocked, despite being a very different game as we'll come to see, is technically a direct sequel to Up Your Arsenal. So yeah. I mean, let's just get into it. Now, before even jumping into this game, we're forced into selecting a difficulty, which is a first for the franchise. Now, considering the game automatically opened on the contestants difficulty, I just decided to keep it at that level, as I assume that's what the game considers its normal mode. If it's not, well, feel free to rinse me in the comments. Either way, the game opens with the Galactic Hunger Games, where we see an absolute amateur get what he deserves as he's blasted up the ass by Ace Hardon. Yes. That's what we're going to be calling him throughout this entire video. Back on the Starship Phoenix, we'd successfully slept our way to the position of Fleet Captain, which couldn't be less believable as we're still a bumbling mess in the presence of the opposite gender.
Well, long time no see. So Metropolis still in one piece, huh?
Greetings, Captain.
Alas, no one seemed to be interested in our lack of aura, as there were more pressing matters to attend to, namely the fact that amateur we saw at the start of the game was actually a well-known hero. Sasha fills us in on Dread Zone, an underground combat tournament whose streams are locked behind a $50 subscription fee. Having saved the galaxy 3 times already, it was anyone's guess as to how we hadn't been invited yet, and if I'm being honest, it was getting borderline offensive.
Unidentified craft approaching.
Now that's more like it. Following a short cutscene where we lay eyes on this adorable, slug thing, we awake to the sight of our withered drill. Having shit ourselves immediately, we're forced to fester in our own feces as we're immediately thrown into the game's tutorial. Deadlocked, for the most part, plays pretty similarly to its predecessors, although there is one major change. Strafing is no longer bound to a button, and instead will automatically apply itself when we have our weapons out. As you'd expect, this tutorial was a complete breeze, and following its completion, we're told by Vox that should we want out of this place, we'd have to fight our way to the top. Concerningly though, any attempt at stealing that adorable slug thing would immediately result in a taser shock to the testicles. With the boundaries clearly defined, we meet up with Al, who introduces us to our new bodyguards. We'll be able to upgrade these guys throughout the course of the game, and as we'll come to see, this is both to our benefit and our detriment.
Ah, stop stealing my kills, motherfucker.
Either way, after talking to Clank for a bit, we entered the Battle Dome for the first time, and if this place wasn't going to kill us, then the dogshit cutscenes would.
We'll see.
What the fuck is going on? What did I just see?
This first arena challenge is a complete joke, which is a good thing, considering my eyes were still recovering from the copious amounts of bleach injected into them. All things considered though, this mission does a good job of introducing some of our bodyguard's special abilities, namely the EMP, which is used to disable shields on larger targets. Having completed this first challenge, a pop-up screen appears showing things like the time taken and how many enemies we'd killed. What really drew my eye, however, was the number of skill points attached. And with my curiosity building, I just had to know, how many do we actually have to obtain?
What? Nah.
Yeah, so this game has more skill points in it than the first 3 games combined. Not only that, but if we want to 100% this game, we'll need to level our health to 100, earn 400,000 dread points, upgrade every weapon to its Omega tier, and most concerningly, beat the entire game on Exterminator difficulty, which isn't even unlocked until we beat the game for the first time. With our work well and truly cut out for us, there was no time to waste as we immediately flew on over to Catacrom 4. Immediately, we get a taste of what Deadlock truly is, a fun fucking game. Each planet in this game is separated into multiple challenges that vary in terms of their objectives. Some require us to scout the area in hopes of finding something, while others have us piloting massive mechs as we shred our way through whatever pathetic resistance force Vox could come up with. As you can imagine, the overall difficulty varies from challenge to challenge, although I wouldn't really say any of the ones on Catacrom 4 were too tough. Having blitzed our way through the first set of challenges, we're then introduced to the Dread challenges, which I initially believed were going to be harder versions of the challenges we'd already completed. That said, I still wouldn't consider these particular Dread challenges to be any harder than the normal ones. Unlike its predecessor, the vehicles are far easier to get the hang of, and while there seemed to be an influx of zombie enemies borrowing from the underground, all this did was help us level our weapons at a faster rate. Apart from working our way to that 400,000 Dread point barrier, it's important that we complete these challenges as we need to earn a certain amount to compete in the next tier of the Dread Zone tournament. That said, we're definitely getting ahead of ourselves here, as to any regular viewer of these games, we were still very much cannon fodder. In the hopes of changing changing that perception, we threw ourselves into the acidic pits of hell, where we fought against massive leviathan tails. The more challenges we completed, the more I relied on my bodyguards. These guys were the real MVPs, as we could essentially ask them to complete all the important objectives while we could focus on the most important one, having fun. Before long, our impressive performances had earned us our very own luxury car, which we immediately took for a test drive. With our dogshit driving skills exposed to the whole galaxy, it was time to lock in, and with our new mounted turret, we had no problems fucking up this mechanized crab. With our confidence restored, we looked to take on the king of Leviathans, who was quite the tanky motherfucker. Thankfully, our bodyguards were distracting him with their unorthodox movement patterns, and after a long 17 years, we finally defeated him with a skill point to boot. After another relaxing drive through the countryside and what technically another dread challenge, we learned of our first real roadblock, Shell Shock. But before we get to face off against him, we had to get rid of his annoying henchmen, as well as his own personal aircraft. Infuriated, Shellshock decides to deal with us himself.
Wait, come back! What the fuck?
Yeah, so this is actually the first of 3 fights we'll be having with Shellshock. Now, I'm not sure about this guy, but giving my opponents 2 whole rounds of fight data doesn't exactly sound like a winning strategy, and this couldn't be more true, as by the time we faced him for real, we knew exactly how to avoid all of his attacks. Having exterminated the first exterminator, we're technically allowed to enter the Avenger tournament. Before that though, we had a little confrontation with Ace Hardon, who seemed to get one at the sheer thought of killing other heroes.
Traitor! Do you think this is some kind of game? That's exactly what it is, furball.
Disturbed at that thought, we pay Al a quick visit, upgrade our bodyguards, and once again step into the battle dome in the hopes of conquering the Tower of Power. These tournaments are essentially the only taste of platforming you're ever going to get in these games, as it's well and truly focused on the fighting. Ironically enough though, the platforming offers some of the greatest challenges, as it requires not only pattern recognition, but timing as well. Reaching the top of this tower has us surviving another gauntlet, this time with a large selection of tougher enemies. By this stage, I'd already locked in and had started abusing the fuck out of the Holo Shield launcher. With this, we'd gotten out of ELO hell, but we weren't done just yet. See, each of these tournaments also comes with its own set of dread challenges, and one of these in particular really felt like a slap in the face. Just for some context, a few minutes beforehand, I'd said this.
Wrench upgrade? Why would I ever need a wrench upgrade?
So you can imagine my reaction when the next dread challenge required us to complete it using only the wrench.
Wait, where's my...
Oh shit. What followed was a painstakingly slow kiting fest where I'd swing at an enemy once every 38 seconds or so. It was truly painful, but I did manage to complete it without dying. Now, despite wanting to end it all, there was one positive outcome from completing this challenge. I had absolute confidence in my abilities heading into the Temple of Shah. This confidence was almost immediately shattered though, as I failed one of the easiest dread challenges. Twice. The goal here is simple. Destroy a bunch of these floating balls to reach a specific score. What I hadn't realized during these initial attempts though was the fact that this bot moved on its own. So there I was, trying desperately to turn around and go back for some of the first targets, not knowing I was fighting a losing battle. Outside of this one challenge though, the rest of the missions weren't too hard to complete, which was honestly surprising as they definitely featured a tougher selection of enemies. These feelings carried on over to Orxon, which did prove to be more challenging than Shah. Most of this difficulty came in relation to the sheer number of enemies we were faced with. Unfortunately for them though, I'd just gotten my hands on one of the best weapons to ever exist.
Wait, did I just one-hit that executioner?
Once again, the only time I'd ever feel threatened was when I was in the Landstalker. I'm not even sure why. I think its slowish movements make it hard to avoid a lot of the damage coming at us. Either way, we did manage to complete every dread challenge, earning us a place in the Crusader tournament. It's here where we get to face off against Reactor. Yeah, this guy was one of the easiest bosses yet. Having obliterated Reactor, we'd gotten this false sense of superiority, and the next 2 planets being just as easy definitely didn't help. The Valix Belt in particular is almost too easy, mainly due to the fact that half of its missions involve flying around in a spaceship. For once, we got to be the cancerous aerial unit that's impossible to hit, as we blasted every enemy from the next galaxy over. Torval, on the other hand, did offer a few challenging moments, as by this point, the game knew it had to throw giant-ass floating scorpion things at us if it wanted us dead. Even these flying freaks of nature couldn't stand up to us, however, and before long, we'd garnered a spot in the prestigious Vindicator tournament. It should be fairly obvious by this point just how different this game is. But if there's one thing that remains consistent, it's that Clank will always pull the 10 out of 10 baddies.
My core CPU.
Ooh, that is a lot of throughput.
Jealous beyond belief, it was up to us to prove to everyone during this tournament that we were indeed him. And to do this, we'd have to fight our way through increasingly difficult waves, with each wave requiring us to use a different weapon. It's a good thing we've been cycling between our weapons and leveling them all equally. Otherwise, this challenge may have proved, well, challenging. The brilliant spectacle that was our godly performance ultimately led to us having to face off against Scyther if he ever got a Mega Evolution. Unfortunately for him though, we've got every possible typing required to inflict super effective damage on him, and while he had a few tricks of his own, we were able to clap his cheeks personally with the Scorpion Flower. The consequence of this choice meant we were left covered in the entrails of this bug, although it wouldn't take long for us to complete a magical girl transformation into a new armor set. Now despite having fought our way to the Vindicator tier, we weren't the only ones making big progress, as Al had somehow figured out how to unlock the BDSM chokers holding us hostage. Being the kink master that he is though, Ace Hardon couldn't accept this, as he not only shot Al right up the ass, but he couldn't help engaging in some light shock play with us as well. Having spent weeks in the submissive role, it was about time we showed these posers who the real Dom was.
They made a mistake bringing us here, Clank. Now they're gonna pay for it.
Before we could do that though, there were still a few planets we had to fight through, the first of which being Stygia. Stygia is honestly just a clusterfuck. Most of the time I had no idea what was going on, as enemies just spawned on top of my face half the time. It also didn't help that a lot of the enemies at this stage were just the overpowered ones, like the Executioners and Laserbacks. That said, this was also one of the easiest planets to complete, mainly due to half the challenges taking place in a vehicle. Alongside this, there were also no dread challenges, which honestly felt a bit strange. I guess Ace Hardon was starting to shit himself at the prospect of us rising up the ranks to face him, so we had no choice but to obliterate their dread challenges on this planet. That's not official law or anything, that's just something I can imagine him doing. While I was imagining these scenarios in my pea-brain, I hadn't realized that our bodyguards had been captured, and despite our constant bickering, I'd grown somewhat close to them. Definitely not close enough to risk my life for them, that's for sure, but it's not up to me unfortunately. It's up to the plot, which saw us traveling to Meraxis to free them. The difficulty definitely steps up here, and it's mainly due to the influx of enemies during each challenge. It honestly feels like you're facing off against an entire army at certain points, which makes it extremely hard to avoid chip damage along the way. That said, there are certain strategies that work extremely well. For example, there's the I'm a certified bitch strategy that sees us camping behind holo shields the entire time. Or what about the I'm dog shit, so let's hide behind this shield strategy. There's also the I'm just leveling my holo shield launcher, I swear strategy, where, well, you get the point.
No shit.
Safe to say, I abused the absolute shit out of this weapon, and it carried me all the way to the Liberator tournament. Before extinguishing Ace's hard-on for good though, I first looked to collect every skill point we'd missed. Now due to the sheer number of skill points present, we'd already obtained a fair few just from playing through the game. For the most part, they were extremely straightforward, with most of them falling into a specific category. There's weapon and mod-based skill points, environmental skill points, bodyguard focus skill points, and difficulty skill points. Outside of the few difficulty-based skill points that require us to complete certain missions on exterminated difficulty, the rest can be completed during this playthrough, and as I said before, most of them were extremely simple to complete. In fact, the only one I struggled with was Invulnerable, which required us to complete any challenge in the Valix belt without taking any damage. There aren't any easy missions we can abuse to grab this one, meaning I had to play like a colossal pussy. But then again, what's new? The only other annoyances were specific weapon challenges, in this case the wrench challenges. These weren't aids because of the difficulty though. See, the ones making me want to somersault into a nuclear missile were my very own bodyguards, who'd straight up just steal my bloody kills. It got to the point where I considered offing them myself, only to not revive them just so I'd be able to complete these skill points in peace. Alas, after multiple cock-block attempts by my own robotic companions, we'd collected all but a handful of skill points. All that was left was the final showdown against the erected superhero, Ace Hardon. Following suit, I immediately erected a holo shield in front of us, almost as if I'd been primed into spamming them. Which, okay, even I admit this is getting a bit ridiculous now. Even so, this fight was interesting, as it felt new yet strangely familiar. That's when it hit me. This scumbag had somehow got a hold of Dr. Nefarious' moveset and just paraphrased it a little bit. From his bombs that send shockwaves across the arena to his shadow clone jutsu who are immediately decimated by our Arbiter. Most of his moves follow a similar pattern to those of the big-headed goofball. The only real difference is that this guy runs away a lot more before whipping out his own shield. Like imagine that, hiding behind a shield. God, that's truly pathetic.
What?
Alas, after getting shafted ourselves, we put Ace hard-on out of his misery. Or so I thought. Who knew his eyebrows could be the last thing to pass on? Either way, with Ace's flaccid body laid to rest, it was our time to shine in the spotlight, as we're offered all the fame we could ever hope for. There was just one catch. We'd have to be Vox's personal toothbrusher, and after getting one whiff of that stench, we knew this relationship would never work out. In defiance, Vox sends us off to the Ghost Station, which features all new enemy types. Well, they're the same enemies, but they're transparent now. Okay, yeah, fine. They're the same, but they might be stronger. Honestly, I have no idea. For a dread zone that was said to be unbeatable, it was very much beatable. Not only does this dread zone have no dread challenges, its skill points were also extremely rudimentary, and after a few runs through each challenge, we'd fully exorcised the Ghost Station. Having beaten him at his own game, Vox had no choice but to play his ultimate trump card, obliterate the entire station that he'd worked his whole life to build. Wait, what kind of shitty plan is that? Either way, with all our biggest haters turning into fans, it was only right we'd put on a show as we pulverized our way through multiple waves of colossal enemies, destroying each power plant as we passed. With the containment fields deactivated and the explosives a non-issue, we're confronted by Vox one last time. And while I expected the cute little slugger to morph into the final boss, instead we're set to face off against Vox himself. Now all things considered, this guy's a complete joke. Not only does he spawn in a bunch of enemies whose sole purpose is to refill the magazine on our guns, but his attacks aren't anything to worry ourselves over either. The only thing he's really got going for him is his tankiness, as even with fully upgraded guns, it was taking a good while to get him down. Now despite getting slapped up by a Lombox who spent the last 3 games getting absolutely humbled, Vox still won't shut up about his goddamn ratings. Having heard enough, we promptly exit this scene, stealing Slugger while we're at it. As we fly off into space, the Dread Station detonates behind us, allowing the whole galaxy, kids included, to witness the humiliating end of Gleeman Vox. Similar to its predecessors, we're immediately slapped in the face by this game's challenge mode, which for all intents and purposes was the hardest experience I'd encountered during this entire playthrough. If you remember from the start, to 100% this game, we'd have to complete the entire thing on Exterminated difficulty, which is unlocked during challenge mode. Safe to say, it didn't take long for me to understand just how rough this playthrough was going to be.
Wait, what is that damage? This is like the first enemy of the game.
To say the enemies did astronomically enormous damage now would be an understatement.
This is fucking bullshit.
Certain missions almost seemed impossible due to how weak my weapons felt, while others required absolute perfection, as getting hit at all would mean being sent back to the start of the stage. Safe to say, my arsehole had never been so sore, as I limped my way through the first half of the game. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, things only got worse later on though, as I would quite literally run out of ammo before being able to kill a single enemy.
I can't believe it. I can't even kill a single enemy with a whole clip.
Dread challenges had started to live up to their name, as I was pounded again and again.
What? He predicted my surge.
The one saving grace was that the enemies that we defeated didn't respawn, so while my death count was getting fucked, I was able to slowly power my way through it. By the time we'd reached the Crusader tournament for the second time, we'd collected 2 Exterminator cards, but that was about to change, as I discovered one of the most broken leveling strategies in the entire game. See, one of the dread challenges in this very tournament has us obliterating a seemingly endless number of enemies as they rush towards a barrier behind us. Just the sheer number of enemies alone makes for an astronomical amount of weapon XP as well as bolts, and having witnessed just how fast that bar fills up, I just knew I'd be camping here for a good while. Thus begun the cheesiest and cheapest campfest to ever grace the gaming world, as I sat on my ass and held down the fire button for every single weapon. To speed things up even more, I had bought out and equipped multiple weapon XP mods to each gun, making their level up speed absolutely ridiculous.
Bro, this is fucking disgusting. What is this?
Within the hour, I had completely maxed out most of my weapons to version 99 and had amassed a staggering amount of bolts. We'd also blown past the 100 nanotech required for the Eviscerator Exterminator card, as well as purchased every mega variant to get the Reactor Exterminator card. As you can imagine, with our supercharged weapons, the rest of the game was relatively easy, although we still had to be somewhat careful as our enemies still did a hefty amount of damage. That said, we were able to take down Ace hard-on for a second time without taking any damage, and ironically
Ironically enough, this was the final skill point that we needed, so not only did this earn us 3 PlayStation trophies, it also earned us the Vox Exterminator card. All that remained now was to complete the Ghost Station once again. This started off relatively well. The enemies couldn't deal with our tremendous damage, and our holo shields lasted for a few millennia before vanishing. This chill energy lasted until the very last stage, where I got absolutely plastered while trying to destroy the power generators. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I died to. There's just so much shit going on at once, and the damage is so immense that you really can't afford to get hit at all. Other times I just completely brain farted, as I forgot to deploy my shield before walking headfirst into Landwalker fire. What the fuck am I doing? What can I say? It wouldn't be a Legend of Kai video if I didn't play like absolute arse during the final mission. Thankfully, our second fight with Vox went as planned, and following the second running of the credits, we were rewarded with our final Exterminator card. Our reward, just like in Up Your Arsenal, is the ninja outfit, thus bringing our 100% adventures, at least within the PS2 saga, to an enjoyable end. Our adventures once again start in the capital of nepotism, Metropolis, where despite its tightening chokehold on the universe's stock market, can't seem to regulate its own traffic. Granted, we chose not to follow them anyway, as we looked to set a new world record in the category shortest game ever made. What wasn't apparent at this point, however, was the fact that in between games, we had been undergoing explosion therapy, which had the unique benefit of protecting us from, well, explosions.
Well, duh.
Now, despite being clowned for it, this therapy couldn't have come at a better time, as the city of Metropolis was being bombarded by an army of fish. No, I'm being fucking serious. While that may sound ridiculous, each of them comes fully armored up in their very own nanotech combat suits. Even so, we've saved the universe on multiple occasions, and I'll be the first to tell you that we've dealt with far tougher enemies than a bunch of mech piloting fish. Eventually, we find ourselves blasting our way across a collapsing bridge, most of which is likely caused by us. Ignoring our need for demolition, we tank yet another explosion before being introduced to every gamer's worst nightmare: motion controls. Having been the world champion of Wii Sports for over a decade though, we had no problem weaving this rush hour traffic. This seemed to be the least of our worries, however, as upon landing, we're immediately dogpiled by more soldiers and forced into our first grind rail segment. These sections can either be some of the hardest or easiest depending on the obstacles present, and as you'd expect from a prologue, this one wasn't too bad, spearheaded by the fact that this battleship never once thought to shoot all 3 of its lasers at the same time. Alas, our triumphant grinding was all in vain, as we were momentarily surrounded by the 4 fishmen of mediocrity. If that wasn't embarrassing enough, we then meet the man who's supposed to be terrorizing the universe, and honestly, despite his massive forehead, his brain might as well be non-existent, as we easily escape his grasp before hijacking his space cruiser as we drift off into the cosmos. Unfortunately, Emperor Pipsqueak here had equipped his ship with a stink bomb so rancid that it immediately took us out. Clank, while fortunate to avoid smelling this putrid stench, wasn't so lucky either. The venom in this punch had naturally taken to Clank's brain as he started to have schizophrenic visions regarding small AI robots. Having learnt of his ability to lucid dream, Clank is awoken by us on a mysterious planet known as Cobalia. Considering we're stuck on an unknown planet, we look to follow the first steps in every survival guide: annihilate the local wildlife by any means possible. This not only establishes our place at the top of the food chain, but it also results in us upgrading our combustor for the first time. Upgrading weapons is a staple of the series by this point, but it does open up the opportunity to discuss what exactly is required to 100% this game. Leveling our weapons to their max Omega levels is one thing, but on top of that, we'll need to obtain all 32 gold bolts, collect all 13 Rhino parts, complete challenge mode and all arena challenges, as well as earn all 55 skill points. On our journey, we stumble across a new resource called Raritanium, and using it, we're able to further upgrade our weapons. For now though, our focus remained solely on making sure the wildlife of this planet was utterly and entirely extinct, as we blasted everything from newborn offspring to colossal slugs, which for whatever reason had its very own health bar. Following its eventual defeat, we strolled into our first spaceport where we did a quick checkup on our explosive resistance before meeting the only guy outside of a costume party to ever wear an eye patch for cosmetic purposes. He agrees to help us get off this dead-end planet, but only if we're able to restore his aeroplane jelly-making factory to full working force. With no other choice, we're forced to take his request, but not before showing him how we truly feel about this whole situation. Granted, that whole sentence was written out of pure cope for what may go down as one of the dumbest deaths in Ratchet & Clank history. Ignoring the blatant career-ending move, we enter the jelly factory where we get to play around with the Gelinator, a device that seemingly never runs out of jelly despite us shooting out copious amounts of it to springboard off. Thankfully for us, the only other life form present in this factory seems to be more interested in getting their asses spanked than eating us, making for a rather tame experience overall. Having gotten his jelly factory back in working order, we're not only awarded with a free Uber ride to a planet of our choice, but also our first golden bolt. Apparently this many benefits was too much for the system to handle, as it promptly gave us the middle finger and crashed.
Hello? What the fuck just happened?
Undeterred, we relaunched the game and got straight back to annihilating the colossal leviathans plaguing this domain. Doing so earned us our first skill point, which is achieved by vanquishing every single floating slug on this planet. Better yet, it seems as though the smuggler had some rather satanic fantasies regarding the souls of these leviathans and was therefore willing to pay us handsomely for them. Having pulled off the biggest scam in galactic history, we wasted no time in putting this scummy money to use as we buy ourselves a new set of clothes. The seller did say that it came with some defensive benefits, but if we're being honest, we bought this mainly for the stylistic upgrade. With our wardrobe upgraded alongside our weapons, we looked to cash in that Uber ride with the smuggler, who despite promising to take us all the way to Stratus City, learnt of our shady dealings with him earlier, resulting in him instantly ejecting us from our seats, resulting in a free fall towards an endless barrage of missiles that we barely avoided. Having taken yet another explosion directly to the forehead, we once again land without a single injury as we look to decimate every mech-covered fish in sight. It's here in Stratus City, however, where Emperor Pipsqueak seems to have improved his army, as we now have to deal with whole-ass tanks. Unbeknownst to him, however, we also gained access to one of the strongest devices in the history of the franchise, the Groovatron. The jaw-dropping beats coming out of our balls is far too enchanting for our enemies to handle, as they're forced into an unwavering dance. This gives us more than enough time to fill their rectums with bullets and bombs, ultimately ending in their destruction. Further along, we discover the weapon this city was built upon, the Shock Ravager, and using it, we're able to fight our way through enemies who stupidly thought a shield would save them. Noticing the evisceration of his army at the hands of our Ravager, Emperor Pipsqueak employed the use of numerous aerial units who made it quite difficult to continue our thrashings. Even so, the fact we had multiple weapons to choose from ultimately meant that even these units stood no chance. Realizing it would take us anywhere from a few years to the rest of our lives to traverse the rest of the city on foot, we instead looked to illegally hitch a ride on the closest public transport, which took us all the way to the city's high ropes course. For whatever reason, this place was heavily fortified with enemies, most of which proved to be quite annoying to hit with our melee weapons.
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
This pathetic display was so shocking to Clank's system that he once again began to hallucinate about these small creatures and the desire to lure us into their dungeon. To make matters even stranger, Clank mysteriously shits out some wings, which we begin to use without ever considering the possibility that they were purely cosmetic in nature. With no real purpose of our own, we follow the mysterious circles produced by these figments of Clank's imagination until we arrive at the Hall of Knowledge. Now, ignoring the fact that this hall has far more water than knowledge, we swiftly navigate the waters that not only house a whole universe's supply of mines, but also these massive jellyfish. Believe it or not, these were the only defensive obstacles guarding the map room, which tells of a planet said to house an endless supply of magic mushrooms. Overcome with intrigue, we wasted no time setting the coordinates for this mysterious planet, although it wouldn't take us long to realize that it had been entirely abandoned. Disappointed, it became our goal to figure out what exactly happened here, with the only clue being tied to this broken down space vessel. Unfortunately, the technology used by this ship was so advanced that the only way in which we could repair it was to find the exact 6 parts missing. By some miracle though, it seems as though these parts just so happened to be located within a 100-meter radius of the ship itself. Outside of purging the only lifeforms to keep this planet's ecosystem in check, we also engaged in our very first Clank-only section. Ratchet might have fancy guns, but Clank here has learnt how to slow down time, making dealing with any enemy a complete joke. Not only that, but he somehow managed to manifest his imaginary friends into his own yes-man army, and with their help, he's able to manipulate objects and levitate across gaps with ease. As I was saying, we're now able to levitate across.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me. You're not that guy.
With another few deaths added to our counter, we finished collecting the rest of the flight components, meaning we could finally restore power to the ship, only for it to immediately start talking.
Thanks for repairing me.
What the hell is even that?
Talking ships were the least of our problems, however, as we're made aware of the fact that should we wish to pilot her, we'd have to take part in some flying lessons. The first one wasn't too bad, as Aphelion here provides us with plenty of health, although knowing we could perish at any moment did make us reconsider the rating we'd be giving following these lessons. Having passed the flying test with flying colours, we land on planet Mukau, which is known to have the most dogshit weather year round. Alongside this miserable weather were some rather annoying enemies, particularly these shocking nut crushers whose main purpose was to jump scare the shit out of us. The remaining enemies couldn't stand up to our new tornado launcher, and before long, we'd ended up at the main spectacle of this entire planet, the arena battles. Unfortunately, because of our shitty excuse for a costume, we're thrown into the arena as punishment as we're forced to fight through wave after wave of complete fodder. The large majority of the enemies present in these challenges die extremely fast, and even though there's a quote-unquote boss battle, he was obliterated within seconds himself. Having become the new champion of the arena, we're forced to listen as Quark admits to us that he got absolutely manhandled by the most basic of enemies. Realizing we'd be better off with a blind caterpillar as a teammate, we collect our new helipods before trying our hand at a few more of these challenges. Most of them were simple enough, but there were a few that, should you attempt them at this point, would immediately diagnose you as brain dead. With the humbling of a lifetime behind us, we moved on over to the other side of this planet, where we looked to take on Pipsqueak's Trial of Terrors. Now, as intimidating as this whole thing sounds, the hardest part was getting off this Ferris wheel. I mean, just look at the views. Along the way, we picked up another golden bolt, as well as some dusty old shoes that help us mimic a speedrunner's movements. It's also along this path where we discover our first holoplan piece, which when completed, acts as the blueprint for one of the universe's strongest weapons. Sadly, that's about all we can get done on this planet at this point, so off we went back to our ship, where we were interrupted by one of the best ad pitches the universe has ever seen.
All for a tidy salary and competitive benefits package.
Wow!
If we weren't the main opposition of said ad, I most likely would have been tempted. Stupidly though, Pipsqueak here didn't think we'd ever watch his lame ass ads, and because of this, he told us exactly where he'd stashed his life savings. Like a dung beetle to shit, before you could blink, we were landing at the Apogee space station, where we ran into a familiar face. The smuggler here is once again gatekeeping, requiring us to siphon a few more Leviathan souls from these floating space slugs. Considering we'd faced a good few enemies earlier on, I went into this with a whole lot of confidence. At least that was the case until I realized we'd have about 5mm to move around on. Along the way, we also made sure to pick up this lone golden bolt before returning to the smuggler with the rest of the Leviathan souls. He lets us use his escape pod in return as we made our way over to this space station, where it seemed the only prerequisite for working here was to have unbelievable platforming skills.
A nerd.
Safe to say, we definitely wouldn't be working here. As you can imagine, the Pipsqueak wasn't dumb enough to leave his life savings unguarded, as we're met with defensive systems that do an incredible amount of damage.
Holy look at all this damage!
Alas, we were determined to steal that money, although upon reaching the safe hold, we learned that we're not the only ones with this goal in mind. With our life hanging in the balance, we looked to make a deal with this trio of idiots who were searching for a particular device. They mentioned how this device could imbue an infinite amount of knowledge into the wearer's head, and while it sounded ridiculous, we had no choice but to follow them to Aradolus, where it was said to be. What they had failed to mention, however, was that this also happened to be the Space Pirates' stronghold, a note that would have been helpful before we started blowing the shit out of their base. As you can imagine, the pirates weren't too happy seeing this happen, and before we knew it, we were being rushed by a dozen enemies at any given time. Granted, our upgraded weapons were more than enough to deal with them, as we ziplined our way into the pirates' treasure safe. Before we're able to steal anything, however, Captain Slag demonstrates his immense sense of smell, despite having no distinguishable nose, leading to us having to be bailed out by a new love interest distraction. Under the guise of a stink bomb, we're able to fight our way through the rest of the pirate base, taking our ball shooting commanders along the way. We might not have found the item we were looking for here, but we did find an artifact which portrayed a rather peculiar planet. With no other leads to go off, we reluctantly tracked a course for this planet, but not before having to complete another space battle segment. The general idea when it comes to these missions is to never stop moving. The moment you do, you're getting blasted to shit by the countless lasers and missile blasts. The other question left to be answered is, where the fuck were we supposed to land? Landing in straight lava would be one thing, but if we're being honest, dive bombing into the heart of a battlefield all while being shot down by missiles wasn't much better. Upon landing, we're forced into a grueling gauntlet of battles where we have to face wave after wave of enemies, some of which are quite annoying to deal with. Just the sheer number of enemies alone and the widespread of them make it almost impossible to avoid ship damage throughout the entire fight. It's more of an endurance battle than anything else, although luckily there is an ammo station halfway through the area, which we can use to restock not only on our ammo, but health as well, as using these vendors will heal us back to full HP. After a few close calls, we did manage to get past this onslaught of enemies and reach the planet's spaceport. We meet with the king of Prouse Gouging once again, who requests a whopping 5,000 bolts for a second-hand gyrocycle. With the whole spaceport choosing to ignore this blatant daylight robbery, we had no choice but to pay his ridiculous fee. At least we got to mimic Super Monkey Ball for a while as we zoomed from tube to tube, dodging fire traps along the way. Towards the end of the track, we meet back up with the 3 swashbucklers as we find what seems to be an old abandoned cinema. And let's just say, there was a very good reason for it to be abandoned. As cryptic as this message was, the 2 brain cells shared between this idiotic duo somehow managed to decipher a location relating to the homeworld of this turtle. What no one could have imagined though was just how ancient that video was, because those very same turtles had now grown into colossal creatures. Luckily for us, they still remained passive in nature, although not every creature gave us that same courtesy.
Okay, we are cooked.
These Gunthers are the Leviathan class enemies on this planet, and boy are they tanky. The good news is that they are extremely slow, making it easy enough to avoid their attacks. After slaying a good few of them and collecting their souls, we're able to return them to the smuggler, who somehow manages to be everywhere we are. He hands us the decryptor, which we use to activate the light pads across the planet's surface. With our wings in action, we're able to fly our way over to the other side of the planet, where we pick up one of the strongest weapons in the entire game. Using it, we blast our way towards an underground research lab where we meet with one of our old friends. The plumber here tells us that this was an old Lombax training facility that ultimately got destroyed following the banishment of the Lombaxes. But before we're even able to ask why, he flushes himself down the toilet as we're contacted by Captain Quark, who is once again begging for us to come to his rescue. Considering how terrified he seemed to be, we made sure to take our time exploring the rest of Sargasso, which saw us landing on the backs of these turtles, obliterating the rest of the Leviathans for their souls, as well as entering ourselves into the Darwin Awards.
Oh my fucking god.
Having essentially left Quark out to dry, we returned to the smuggler where we traded in the rest of our Leviathan souls, and using the funds earned, we picked up the Helios armor before heading back to Mukau. Before taking part in the fight festival once again, we made sure to grab the last golden bolt hidden behind this decrypted puzzle. Our main goal, however, saw us fighting our way through another set of arena challenges in the hopes of winning the Hollow Guys. The boss in our way this time around was, this thing, although he wasn't too hard to beat down with extremely telegraphed attack patterns. With the Hollow Guys in our hands, I once again let my ego get to me as I attempted to complete every other arena challenge possible. With our ego in the dumps, the only chance we had at redemption was to locate the Ares supercomputer, as it was said to have the power to erase the memories of everyone present at the arena that day. Thankfully, it seems as though this supercomputer was located back at the pirate stronghold, and with the Hollow Guys now in our possession, we had no problems twerking our ass to gain access to confidential areas.
What did he say?
The only real struggle we had was actually getting to these private sectors, as the turrets located here could eviscerate us within a matter of seconds. If that wasn't bad enough, we had to face off against this ball-loving mech once again, and while his balls aren't too fast, the sheer size of them paired with the limited space we have made this fight rather awkward. Regardless, with him defeated, we're able to gain access to the supercomputer, although annoyingly, it seems as though someone had removed it from the power socket. Instead of simply plugging it back in though, Clank demanded some screen time, instead taking it upon himself to fix the computer from the inside out. As with most of Clank's sections, this one was also incredibly easy, mainly due to his ability to slow time, making every obstacle a complete cakewalk. Even after fixing the computer, it was brought to our attention that we'd need it updated in order to erase the spectator's memory. Feeling bad, the computer instead looks to help us find the Dimensionator, although if we're being honest, she might as well have been speaking in ancient Latin. To make matters worse, Clank was also experiencing a disturbing vision regarding our crush. Considering our poor track record with women, it was only right that we'd attempt to rescue our new crush who had been imprisoned on planet Visceron. With our stress levels at an all-time high, it was only a matter of time before we'd crack, taking it out on Clank and his schizophrenic visions.
Why? Because your imaginary friends told you so?
To say our relationship had been tarnished would be an understatement, and honestly, the mistrust brewing between us couldn't have come at a worse time, as we needed to sneak through one of the most heavily guarded prisons. It was only a matter of time before this fight cost us dearly, and boy oh boy did it cost us. As you can imagine, trying to break someone out of prison isn't the easiest feat to complete. The enemies present here are some of the toughest we've faced so far, and considering the amount of damage they do, it was imperative that we were on our A game.
From the scrap compressor. We'll meet up with you once the coast is...
In what can only be described as a miracle, however, we somehow managed to free Talluin from the clutches of this train. As we were making our triumphant escape though, we're told by Quark that he had stolen the coordinates of the planet which was said to house the Dimensionator. The only problem with this information was the fact that we had to fly directly into a black hole to reach it. We weren't the only ones having a bad time though, as Kochu City was in the middle of a bombardment from the space pirates. This unfortunately made things more difficult for us as we had to fight through wave after wave of these idiots. The main struggle however came in the form of this planet's boss. The fight opens up on a grind rail segment which isn't too hard. The main concern though is any damage taken here carries on over to the fight itself, which is an absolute clusterfuck of an experience. Not only does this rat bastard crowd our limited space with rockets, but the moment you drop to the ground, you're bum rushed by a million roller dudes. Most of the fight I had no idea what I was even aiming at, as it seemed like only certain areas of his body were susceptible to damage. This was by far the toughest boss we'd faced so far, although it was worth it, as we're graced by the device so many sought to possess. Speaking of which, it seems Captain Saga had been studying up on battle royale tactics as he quite literally third parties us here before stealing the Dimensionator for himself. Fortunately, Clank had managed to shove a tracking device up Rusty Pete's ass while he was captured, ultimately leading us right to Slag's fleet. This also meant we had the element of surprise when raiding the fleet, and you can bet your sweet ass we used that to our advantage.
2 seconds later.
So that was a fucking lie.
Eventually, we came across the epicenter of this whole area, and it's here where I cooked up a strategy so ingenious. The developers had to include a countermeasure.
So if I just put this turret here and then, what, like run behind the cut? Wait, what? Wait, where's the bridge gone? With our bitch-made playstyle out of commission, it seems we had no choice but to face this challenge head on. Alright, maybe there's another way. The main challenge here is just managing the number of enemies that begin to swarm around you. The 4 swabs at the end are particularly dangerous as their attacks literally 2-hit us at this point in the game. Captain Slag in comparison was a complete cakewalk, and upon his defeat we get an Oscar-worthy performance from Pete.
The Oscar goes to...
Now, if there were one place I'd advise not going AFK at, it'd be when entering the homeworld of our mortal enemies, the Cragmites. Alas, even with half our health, it was time to show this absolute fodder what it really means to be the main protagonist of a legendary franchise. If I'm being honest, the fact that there's an ammo vendor behind this area makes this whole gauntlet fight far too easy, as anytime we're in some danger, we can quickly scoot over to the vendor to heal up completely. After a grueling battle of endurance, wits and determination, we witness what may be the most embarrassing display of power yet. With that awkward display out of the way, we continue to pave the way towards Quark, who Clank clearly knows nothing about.
Ratchet, Captain Quark may be a lot of things, but I do not believe he would surrender the Dimensionator just to spare his own life.
Stop the cap.
To no one's surprise, the moment we come across Quark, he's already handed the Dimensionator over to Mr. Pipsqueak here in an attempt to save his own skin. We're then forced to watch in disbelief as Pipsqueak activates the device, causing a wormhole to form, releasing hordes of Cragmites in the process. Amazed at Quark's ability to continuously be worthless, we decide to end things ourselves. Realizing the franchise still had the potential to generate a fat sum of money, Insomniac, now disguised as Clank, dropped soon after in the hopes of rescuing the disheartened Lombax. His section, as always, was incredibly easy. I mean, we don't even have to kill the enemies, they'll do that themselves. With that said, this area came pre-packaged with one of the biggest obstacles known to man. It was almost like the game was too embarrassed to be beaten by someone of my dogship caliber, as it wouldn't stop freezing at this point. By some miracle though, we were able to pass this section only to learn that Ratchet had survived all along. That said, without our robotic friend, we'd have to carefully platform our way through these caverns while taking care of this new group of enemies. The Cragmites are without a doubt the toughest group of enemies we've faced so far. Not only are they far tankier than most enemies, but their ability to constantly phase out of existence and move elsewhere make it extremely annoying to deal consistent damage to them. This is further amplified when we meet our first Cragmite hunter. In a one-on-one situation, he isn't too hard to deal with, but the sheer amount of time taken to defeat him did raise some alarm bells. With that sinking feeling in the back of our minds, we reunite with the gang where we learn that Emperor Pipsqueak has taken his massive forehead to the city of Meridian. Before heading there though, I made sure to collect the 2 golden bolts hidden behind us. The raid on Meridian City brought with it countless enemies ranging from these weak ass tadpole looking freaks to the enormous obsidian enforcers that take about 17 nukes to defeat. Safe to say, there were quite a few close calls as most of the enemies can likely 2-hit you with their damage at this point. The never-ending swarm of Cragmites was one thing, but the most lethal factor as always was my dogshit skills. After 12 long minutes of grueling gameplay, we did eventually reach Captain Cork, who as expected was too busy taking a dump in his spandex to know where Emperor Pipsqueak had run off to. Clank, on the other hand, threw one of the biggest airballs when suggesting that he may have returned to Fastoon, and considering we were eating missiles before even landing here, I'd say he completely sunk that ball in the basket. That said, we are getting a bit ahead of ourselves as we didn't exactly travel to Fastoon straight away. Instead, I made sure to revisit every other planet in the hopes of recollecting the remaining golden bolts that we'd missed on our first time through. This had us twerking on our dole list, riding atop these massive turtles on Sargasso, and getting royally fisted by the game mechanics in Stratus City.
What the fuck? Wait, what the fuck?
What I haven't mentioned is the fact that I was also looking to complete a few skill points while revisiting these planets. These range from committing mass robot genocide to making a large group of enemies twerk for us before blasting them with a turret. Before long, we'd collected our last golden bolt, meaning we could finally return to descending upon Fastoon. It seems as though Emperor Pipsqueak had mobilized the remainder of his Cragmite army here, as there honestly seemed to be no end to them. Due to the sheer number of them and the majority of them being extremely tanky, ammo conservation became our #1 concern. It honestly felt like I was unloading multiple weapons worth of clips into the same few enemies, only to get 2 hit in the end. We faced wave after wave after wave of these Cragmites, and when you thought it was over, another wave would spawn in. If nothing else, at least it provided good XP for our weapons, which by this point were mostly maxed out at their version 5 counterparts. During this clusterfuck of a final battle, we somehow managed to grab the final golden bolt, earning us the respective skill point, which ironically enough gave us the boost we needed to push through the final obstacle. This was it, teaming up with this band of misfits, chasing down the Dimensionator, clapping Cork's cheeks. All of it was for this moment, a showdown with the tiniest emperor in the whole known universe. Oh, scratch that. It looks like he took our jokes to heart as we're now forced to face off against a height-extending mech suit. Unfortunately for Pipsqueak here, no matter how tall he is, he'll always remain the main antagonist and is therefore destined to lose.
Oh, fuck.
In all seriousness though, this final boss fight was surprisingly difficult, at least comparatively to the rest of the boss fights we'd had so far. His first phase isn't too bad, although he is extremely tanky, requiring us to use a good portion of our ammo supplies just to make it to the second phase. It's here where the battle really begins though, as not only does Pipsqueak here gain a whole new arsenal of new moves, he oftentimes layers them on top of each other, making avoiding damage less likely than taking a lightning strike straight to the nutsack. This laser beam attack in particular was my kryptonite, as it seemed hell-bent on eviscerating any credibility I had left. With another few deaths added to the death count, I thought it was about time we switched up our strategy, with my main priority being to shut down that laser beam / missile combo, and that's when it hit me. There's no possible way Pipsqueak could launch that combo if he was twerking for us. And just like that, the Groovatron abuse strategy was born. Using it, we're able to put Pipsqueak down for good, saving the galaxy in the process. With the power of plot armor on our side, we miraculously escape the jaws of death as we reunite with the whole gang back on Fastoon. Despite our heroics, it seems a happy ending wasn't in store for us as Clank is hypnotized and taken away in one of the biggest cliffhangers this franchise has ever seen. Just like its predecessors, Tools of Destruction allows us to start a new playthrough called Challenge Mode. This mode not only increases the strength of our enemies, but it also adds new weapon upgrades as well as a new bolt multiplier that resets back to 1 times every time you get hit. Because we collected every golden bolt on our first playthrough, this second playthrough was mainly to upgrade all of our weapons to their Omega variants and max out their levels, as well as earn the skill points we hadn't quite completed on our first playthrough. Now because of the sheer amount of them, I am not going to cover each and every one of them. Rather, I'll discuss which ones made me want to dive headfirst into a pool of cement, the first of which saw us attempting to destroy some goddamn sore spots with our wrench. In theory, this one sounds easy enough. Just walk through the stage defeating enemies, and whenever you see a sore spot, just whack it with your wrench, right? The only problem is that should any stray gunfire or explosions hit those pots, you'll have to start the whole level over again. This happened far more times than I'd like to admit, with most attempts ending while fighting off this massive mech bastard. The only method I found to work required for us to teleport to the end of the level and backtrack to the first 2 pots. Only then could we teleport back to the start and finish off by destroying the final 2. This strategy makes it so you can avoid a lot of the tougher, more AoE inducing enemies. Other skill points that were quite aids involved reaching the final boss of the Verdigris black hole stage without taking a single hit. And the worst of all, everyone dance now, which requires us to make every enemy unit dance. And when I say every, I mean every single pixel this game has to offer needs to be twerking at some point. Whether it's the dumbass fish inside the mech suits, Rusty Pete during the boss fight against Captain Slag, or even your pet dog. Having to make each and every enemy dance without a checkable list is downright sadistic. It's only made worse by the fact that there are enemies who only show up in one place, and who aren't reachable after you've passed that stage in the story, meaning should you miss them, you're going to have to play through the game all over again. These enemies include all the bosses, the Leviathans, as well as the turrets and security bots in the Apogee space station. We are able to buy a golden Cruvatron at least, which is pretty much essential for this skill point as we're able to use it as many times as we want. It was also during our challenge run that we obtained the final Rhino holoplan, which we were able to give to the smuggler who hands us the Rhino in return. When it came to leveling our weapons, I mainly stuck to farming Meridian City, as it included a few Cragmite Hunters as well as an Obsidian Enforcer that awarded monstrous amounts of weapon XP each time it was defeated. To speed things up, I would instantly kill myself following its defeat just to go and do the same run all over again. I doubt it's the fastest or most efficient method, but it did seem to work well for the large majority of our weapons. Towards the end, I ended up travelling back to Slag's fleet, where I used the 4 swap spawns to level our Rhino to Omega VX, thus earning us the No Up Your Arsenal skill point. All that remained was to rip Pipsqueak a new arsehole, ultimately earning us the final 2 skill points required for 100%. This brings to a close our adventures during Tools of Destruction, and considering we perished 33 times, it wasn't a pretty one. With that said, we don't exactly have time to mope about our dog shit skills, as we've got a robot to rescue. Or at least that's what I would have said had we not been distracted for a whole year at the prospect of infinite wealth. See, following Clank's abduction, we'd gotten rather close with Taluin, who'd brought to our attention the infamous pirate Captain Armstrong Arswater, who despite his unfortunate name, was said to be the richest pirate to sail the toilet bowl seas. Given our love for money and adventure, it shouldn't come as a surprise to learn that we immediately intercepted the pirate fleet of Sprocket, Arswater's first mate. Although surprisingly, the first pirate we run into is one we know very well.
I miss you too, Rusty Pete.
It would seem Rusty Pete here hadn't coped too well with the loss of his captain, as he's taken up ventriloquism in the year that he's been gone. Regardless, his actions result in us being discovered, although luckily, the combined IQ between these 3 pirates matches that of a cheese toastie, as following our capture, we're chucked into his cannon that merely flings us to a neighbouring ship. Surprisingly, we start this game with a good selection of weapons, most of which are already leveled to their V3 versions. This makes the art of clapping cheeks almost elementary, as we wiped the floor with this pathetic pirate fleet. Before long, we were launching our way towards the command post, where we'd surely find information regarding Arswater's stash of treasure. Wait, what? Somehow we seem to have been captured a second time, yet once again it seems as though these dumbass pirates hadn't realised that shooting us out of cannons wasn't exactly a viable method of execution. Even so, with the help of Rusty Pete here, our trajectory does get changed to Hulafar Island, which I've got to say is quite the bizarre island. I only say that because upon waking up on said island, we start envisioning Clank floating above us, when in reality, we're most likely suffering from a nasty concussion. To make matters worse, we seem to have lost all of our weapons, albeit we did manage to hold on to not only our grav boots, but our wrench as well. 2 items that were mandatory in finding the entrance to this village. Plot armor is a beautiful thing. In an even more unbelievable twist, the first person we meet at this village just so happens to be the local sex worker who has unfortunately been struggling to find new clients due to the island supply beacon being severely damaged. With Clank still freshly in our minds, we agreed to help repair the supply beacon in the hopes that we'll be able to use it to communicate with him. Before any of that though, we had to make sure that the villagers roaming the area knew their place in the food chain. Following this clear display of abuse, we run into yet another familiar face, who by this point might as well be our very own personal stalker. I mean, why in the fuck is this guy even here? Like, this is just some dead island, no? Ignoring the potential stalker for now, we get to work fixing the numerous turbines located around the island. That said, you've really got to question why things like saw blades and time steam valves even exist on these goddamn turbines. But if there's one thing it does confirm, it's that the leader of this village doesn't give 2 shits about health and safety regulations. Thankfully, we're seasoned veterans at this point in our adventure, meaning we had no real struggles while fixing this set of turbines. Doing this once could be written off as a mistake, but doing it twice, now that's a self-diagnosed case of brain damage. Having added 2 completely unnecessary deaths to our death count, I thought it best to find a safer, more reliable method of reaching the remaining turbines. This took the form of an intense grind rail section which had us avoiding electrical gears and whatever the fuck this was supposed to be. Turning this last screw opened up the sacred door to the comms unit, where we reunited with our favourite adult performer. He introduces us to the Obsidian Eye, a telescope said to have the power to find a needle in a haystack. Unfortunately, it couldn't really help us, as Clank wasn't anywhere near a haystack, but there was a silver lining. See, Captain Arsewater had apparently been a regular client of our new friend here, meaning he'd heard all about his hidden loot. Granted, we couldn't reach this area without some help, and despite not trusting Pete completely, we had no choice but to listen to him narrate his own journey as we somersault our way through the toilet bowl seas. Having thrown up our last 4 meals onto the ship, we wasted no time disembarking at what I can only imagine are the caverns in which Arsewater stored all of his adult magazines. Now, as spooky as this area would like you to think it is, there are quite literally no enemies for us to fight on the way to Arsewater's corpse. There are a few groupings of indestructible bats, but as long as you're not trying to have sexual intercourse with them, you shouldn't have a problem.
What?
Most of the challenge in this section comes from the tight platforming and the random chase scenes where we're getting shot by massive pythons. With that said, we managed to locate Arsewater's body without too much struggle, but realizing the game would be far too short to end here, Rusty Pete looks to backstab us, ultimately reviving Arsewater and Captain Swag in the process. Fortunately for us, it seems as though Captain Swag cheated on Arsewater while they were dating, with the resulting trauma bubbling up to the point where they needed to go get couples therapy. This gave us some much needed leeway, as they weren't the only ones revived in the process. It's a good thing we blackmailed Rusty Pete into giving us back some of our weapons, as we'd be well and truly cooked trying to fight our way out of these caverns as we were ambushed by countless reanimated pirates. Reanimated space pirates weren't the only things we had to worry about though, as every time we got off an elevator there'd be these same massive pythons looking for a fight. Granted, now that we have our upgraded weapons back, these large critters aren't too bad to take down. Upon reaching our ship, we completely forget that Tallywind is still stuck in the caverns, and instead sail our way back to Hulafar Island alone. Thankfully, it seems as though more of our weapons had washed along the shoreline while we were out, which was a blessing considering the island was immediately raided by Captain Bipolar. One thing I did notice about this game was how quick our weapons leveled up. Although considering the game's overall length, it makes sense that these weapons would level up quickly. This gauntlet was surprisingly challenging all things considered, mainly due to the vast amounts of enemies present. I'd oftentimes find myself running out of ammo towards the latter half of the fight, and the constant green hue didn't exactly help when looking to avoid the cannonballs being fired at us. While all of this was happening, the villagers had been preparing an ancient weapon, said to have the power to repel even the gods. Although upon seeing it,
oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
the idea here is to blast this ship's cannons, which would have been far easier if we didn't have the lost souls of our ex-girlfriends still haunting us. If that wasn't harrowing enough, there's a whole ass second wave of enemies, with these ones being far tougher to defeat. Reanimated pirates is one thing, but where the fuck did this mech come from? It legitimately looks like it crawled its way out of the seas below and felt so left out that it just started fighting as well. Complaining aside, we once again have to man the turrets, fight off our ex-girlfriend's souls, as well as blast the remaining cannons just to get them to leave us alone. Now while we may have survived this battle, there was no way in hell we were surviving this next one.
Ratchet, come in. I was able to boost back to the island alone. Guess I know how Clank must feel.
To make matters worse, we looked to brighten the mood with a few jokes, although the cold hard truth we got as a response confirmed they hadn't quite landed. Disappointed, we looked to pursue Captain Bipolar, but with no leads to go off, there really was nothing for us to do apart from stand underneath this random fireball. In some kind of roundabout way, this fireball acted as a metaphor for a lightbulb moment in which we cooked up the idea to ask the smuggler for some help. As is the case with every deal with this guy, we're forced to pay a hefty price for his services, although it was definitely worth it as we not only arrived at Arsewater Cove, but we also got a few more of our weapons back. With the prospect of unlimited wealth still up for grabs, we wasted no time intimidating these dumbass doors into letting us through.
That ain't no pirate I ever heard of. Be gone, or find your soul plucked from your bones for all eternity.
Having been humbled by a door, we had no choice but to trick him into believing we were Arsewater himself. Doing so was going to be no easy feat, however, as we're tasked with proving ourselves in combat. God knows what kind of colossal beast we'll have to fight through. The inside of the camp was much of the same, as we looked to prove to these masks that we were indeed their captain. This involved us crafting drinks despite the
unnecessarily cryptic and bizarre fashion,
as well as a memory game where we play one of the worst anthems ever concocted.
Completing these tasks alongside this final puzzle doesn't award us with any loot, but instead another goddamn fight where we need to fend off multiple waves of increasingly difficult enemies. It may have taken a while, but we did eventually crack open this door, revealing the hidden treasures inside. All we had to do was make sure we didn't fall for what may be the most obvious trap imaginable. With our IQ well and truly in the negatives at this point, we watch in horror as Captain Bipolar not only reclaims his long lost loot, but also takes our girl for himself. Furious, we fight our way through these underground caves, making sure to convert all our fury and rage into some godlike skills. Ignoring that pitiful death, we continue to fight our way through the caverns, only to realize that our supposed super weapons couldn't even outrange the basic ass blasters used by these pirates.
This is not okay.
Feeling cheated, we looked to use some sneaky tricks of our own, which saw us calmly walking past our enemies and railing them from behind, as their one weakness seemed to be their inability to turn around. The struggles only looked to continue, as we're ambushed by Sprocket, who smelt as if he had climbed out of a dumpster. Granted, we're not one to shy away from letting him know. The fight itself isn't too bad, although he does call upon a few of his henchmen to shoot out their offspring in an attempt to distract us, although unluckily for him, we were dead set locked onto him. From here, we take the elevator up towards a crane rail that guides us back to the shoreline. Boarding our ship, we buy the Alpha Disruptor from the smuggler before giving chase. Once again, we board Arswater's pirate fleet, although this time we'll have to constantly deal with him as he floats around from ship to ship. The final battle against him is a rather interesting one, as he starts the fight being completely immune to our damage. It's only after we throw the skulls of his crew onto him that he becomes susceptible to damage, all the while he's throwing out large slashes to the beat of a symphony. Thank God these attacks do barely any damage, as I could not for the life of me dodge them. It was far closer than it needed to be, but we did manage to defeat him on our first attempt. Pete, being the idiot that he is, decides to jump in after him, giving us back the keystone in the process. With Arswater's loot acquired, it was only right that we return to the Obsidian Eye in an attempt to contact Clank. To everyone's surprise though, this strategy actually worked, although at the end of the day, it wasn't Clank who drew our attention, but rather a foe that we dearly missed. Thus ends our short career as a pirate, although it wasn't nearly as short as the contracts for Rusty Pete and Slag's voice actors. At the end of Quest for Booty, we had died a total of 4 times, making it by far the easiest game in the series so far. I can almost guarantee you that our confrontation with Dr. Nefarious will bring far more bloodshed than this. A Crack in Time picks up where A Quest for Booty ends.
No shit.
In which we see the infamous Dr. Nefarious emerge from the shadows after years of wallowing in pity after getting his ass kicked by us all those years ago. It seems he's been contracted by the Zonai to install a few more gadgets within Clank's systems. These additions include the likes of a boiling tap, a compost bin, and most importantly, free Wi-Fi. When trying to install these new features, however, Clank's immune system, known in the northern parts of the galaxy as a firewall, kicked in, causing Nefarious's brain to fart uncontrollably, where he's told off by his Zonai overlords. Overcome with rage, Nefarious plays his latest playlist made up of the worst songs to ever grace the universe. Even supreme beings like the Zonai were no match for this guy's dogshit taste in music, although on the bright side, it was enough to shatter Clank's eardrums, who used this opportunity to escape Nefarious's clutches. Thus begins the first game, where we start its prologue as Clank instead of Ratchet. As you can imagine, this stage is designed to teach us all about Clank's movement abilities, which consist of a few separated jumps, a light punch, and yeah, I guess that's about it. Try as we might, our tiny ass legs were never going to outrun Dr. Nefarious's monologue. Even in these pressing times though, all I could truly focus on was just how good this game's cutscenes looked in relation to the previous games. Now, in spite of Clank's dire situation, you could argue ours was even worse, as we've somehow managed to get stuck with Captain Dork here. To make matters worse, we're hit by the Ratchet and Clank staple, which essentially equates to us crash landing on some random planet to start the game. Having cloned a Cat's 9 lives ability means we once again emerge from these crashes completely unharmed, although the clear distortion in time which saved us this time around was a curious sight to behold. Unsure of where we'd landed, it was imperative that we explored the surrounding area, hand-holding Quark along the way.
What's immediately noticeable even this early into the game is the lack of movement options due to us not having Clank strapped to our backsides. Without him, we don't have the fail-safes like gliding to save us in case of an emergency, meaning we needed to be more precise than ever when it came to our platforming. The enemies present in this forest didn't put up much of a fight, although they can overwhelm you with their numbers if you put your controller down and go onto the toilet while fighting them. After hours of trekking, we finally come across another sentient being, although to our dismay, they immediately beg us to help them. Apparently, this creature was competing for the Worst Parent of the Year award, as she'd somehow lost all 3 of her children while saving her own skin. Luckily for her, we needed all the weapon experience we could get, so off we went, farming this absolute fodder while also saving her children in the process. It's here where we get our first constructor mod, which can be applied to specific weapons to change their mechanics. Alongside this constructor mod, we also earned our first skill point for destroying 2 enemies with a single bullet, before collecting our first golden bolt as well. Now's as good a time as any to discuss what exactly is required to 100% a Kraken time. As is the case in most Ratchet and Clank games, we'll need to obtain all 40 golden bolts, capture all 40 zonai, earn all 46 skill points, collect all 10 Rhino holoplans, level every weapon to their max Omega variant, grab all constructor mods, as well as obtain all armor upgrades. With that massive list in mind, we return to the mother of these children, who as thanks decides to take us to her village. What she hadn't realized when suggesting this was the fact that we were about to rob them blind, starting with this golden bolt. Up next was this trapped zonai, whose capture somehow resulted in the traps leading up to this cavern becoming even more lethal. Slightly faster traps were soon to be the least of our worries, however, as the village was attacked by Nefarious's personal assassin, Lord Lamerson. The fight to follow is our first real taste of combat, as multiple robot variants swarm in on top of us. Thankfully, Lord Lamerson seemed to have brought the weakest of his personnel, as no one here could stand up to our putrid burps of our frog blaster. Fearing for his life, Lamerson hightails it out of here, and with no ship of our own, all we can do unfortunately is watch as they fly off into the galaxy. Or at least that's what you'd think. In reality, should we capture enough of these zonai, we can then force them to do some manual labor, and in this case, that would see them repairing our ship. With the power of slavery resting under our butt cheeks, we're able to shoot our way into the Phylox sector, where we're introduced to the hub worlds of this game. Each sector includes numerous planets, moons, and enemy satellites, and if we're to 100% this game, we'll need to clear each and every one of them. For now though, our goal was simple: annihilate Lord Lamerson. To do so, we first had to deal with this pathetic squadron of ships, which act as perfect targets to test out our new homing missiles. With this fleet annihilated, Lamerson had no choice but to watch in horror as we boarded his ship, and while he scraped the skid marks of fear from his underwear, we masterfully worked our way through his security measures, making sure to eviscerate anyone that stood in our way. Along the way, we grab our first holoplan before freeing the villagers in Quark who had been captured in the battle beforehand. Realizing Quark would have been nothing but a hindrance, we make sure to ship him off with the villagers at the first sight of an escape vessel. With no one to hold us back, it was time to confront the main man himself. Now, considering this is our first boss fight, it shouldn't come as a surprise to know that this guy is extremely weak. That being said, he does have some cool tricks, like being able to turn invisible and whatnot, but the lack of any threatening attacks, paired with the overpowered weapons at our disposal, meant that this guy never stood a chance. Following his defeat, we make our way back to Aphelion, where we're finally given a chance to explore these somewhat open hub worlds. Each green dot on our minimap signifies a moon or objective that is yet to be completed, and considering our 100% aspirations, I felt the need to complete as many as possible. The moons in particular can range from fairly simple objectives to rather complex platforming segments that need to be completed should you have any chance of reaching the zonai located on them. There are also a few that just seem to be there to confuse the fuck out of you. Wait, that's quicksand? Oh my fucking god. The benefit to losing our minds completing these moons early is that the more zonai we collect, the more upgrades Aphelion receives. The first of which being one of the most useful ones, as it helps lower the travel time between moons and planets. With that in mind, I thought it was about time for a change of scenery, and I wasn't alone in this thought as we instead snapped back to Clank, who was in the middle of being resurrected. It's here where we meet the local janitor, who had accidentally tripped our backup generator while cleaning us. Accident or not, this gave us a second chance at life, and given the stakes, it wasn't one we could afford to squander. The janitor here tells us that he knew our father and urges us to follow him. It's here where we learn that Clank's been equipped with a few more abilities, namely the ability to create clones of himself that he can control within a limited time frame to do whatever he wants. House chores and shopping aside, the main purpose of this power was to solve the many puzzles located throughout the Great Clock. If that wasn't enough power, we're soon transported into the Matrix, where we meet a small being claiming to be our father. In an attempt to make up for all the birthdays he'd missed, he gives us the almighty time staff, which we could use to throw time bombs. As you may have noticed, time slowed down inside these bombs, making it possible to traverse across lightning fast platforms. In addition to this, it makes combat a complete cakewalk, as enemies stuck inside these time bombs move slower than my upload rate. Nothing proves this theory more than our first boss fight inside the Great Clock. All we really need to do here is continuously keep this thing trapped inside our time bombs as we slowly whittle them down with some slaps from our staff. Dr. Nefarious in the meantime had been practicing his torturing skills as he forced his troops one by one to suffer through his terrible acting skills. By this point, we'd finally made our way into the Vela sector, where I once again spent most of my time exploring the nearby moons in hopes of finding more golden bolts, constructo mods and zonite bots. We also paid a quick visit to Axiom City, where we purchased our first set of armor. Now admittedly, I was premature when coming to this planet, as we didn't own the required gadget to proceed further into this city. But then again, this is far from the only time I've been premature.
What do you mean by that?
With that detour out of the way, we instead made our way over to Saturn's washed up cousin, Torrent 4. Now despite looking barren as shit, these fields do in fact house some sentient robots. It's just a shame that they're surrounded by ones looking to perform a penectomy on us. If things weren't already strange enough, we soon found ourselves talking to an amalgamation of metal parts. And worse yet, we were actually taking his words seriously. This meant we'd have to find another way to breach the city, which involved a few grind rails. Despite being accepted into the community, the first thing I noticed about the people here was the sheer lack of an IQ above room temperature. The second thing I noticed was that each and every one of them smelled like they had dove headfirst into a toilet bowl of shit. It was only after I brought this to their attention that they mentioned that the city hadn't produced hot water in decades, unfortunately meaning our work here wasn't quite finished. Thankfully, the solution to this problem wasn't as complex as you might think, as all we needed to do was abduct some battery bots and force them to give up their lives to supply power to the rest of this city. Repowering the city not only provided hot water for the civilians, but it also reactivated the springs, allowing us to reach the back end of this area. It's here where we make one of the, if not the greatest discovery in our lifetime, as we spot a figure that looks eerily similar to us. Before we are even given a chance to take things in, however, he launches a pile of his discharge, which we narrowly avoid. Furious, we give chase in one of the most intense grind rail sections to date, as we need to avoid bombs, falling objects, and electrical wire traps. We do eventually catch up to him, only to learn that he was a good friend of our father's. In the conversation to follow, we learn that Clank is most likely in the Great Clock, although to reach it would be no easy feat. In the meantime, Alistair looks to train us in the art of hoverbooting, although the pair he offers us looks like they haven't been washed in over a millennia.
Brother, what's that?
Alas, permanent loss of smell didn't sound too bad if it meant we could zoom around the ground and, more importantly, hover in the air. Our lessons end with one last trial lap, which honestly wasn't too bad as the controls are all fairly intuitive, which was a welcome surprise. That said, I wouldn't say our skills were that great just yet. Acquiring the hover boots meant we could now return to specific moons that we couldn't complete before. And it still looks like we can't complete them. What the fuck was that? All joking aside, I spent the next few moments returning to old moons in the hopes of finding hidden items that couldn't be obtained before. Having wasted enough time already, it was finally time to return to Axiom City, where we could now use our hover boots to access the main part of the city. Sadly, this part of the city was also inhabited by killer robots, whose only mission seemed to be the evisceration of our arsehole. After a few grueling battles, we finally reunite with General Alistair, only to be thrown into yet another battle against what felt like a never-ending group of enemies. With Alistair by our side, we infiltrate the main industry plant, where we once again come up against some hostile resistance. The good news is that none of the enemies present here are too tough to take down, although I think that's due in large part to the wide array of overpowered weapons at our disposal. Either way, our infiltration ends with us breaking into a room full of Discord mods. Granted, not even Discord mods would spew lines as diabolical as this guy.
I'll have you know, I am a level 60 wizard with melee ability.
With the mods put in their place, it was only a matter of time before they'd retaliate, and retaliate they did as they summoned what could only be described as the lamest looking boss in Ratchet and Clank history. Tragically, the fight itself wasn't much better, as it mainly involved waiting out and dodging his attacks before loosening its nutsack from its core body. We do get to face off against whatever the fuck this thing's supposed to be, but if I'm being honest, the rest of this fight might as well have been a fever dream. Following its defeat, we narrowly escape the nuke exploding behind us as we're dropped off back to our ship by Alistair. He tells us to meet him in the Korthos sector, which according to galactic maps would take us upwards of 5 business days to reach. Now as concerning as this was, it didn't appear like our arch nemesis Dr. Nefarious was using this time too wisely, as he'd rather spend it imitating animals. He's then joined by the goddess of plus size modelling, and together they make it their goal to eviscerate us from existence. On the other side of the galaxy though, we touch base with Clank, who by this point was well and truly abusing the fuck out of his new time controlling powers. It's in this very sector where we learn of the 2 most important rules with regards to the Great Clock.
Number 1. Under no circumstances is it to be used as a time machine.
Okay. We're then tasked with lasering the shit out of the planet, with our ultimate goal being to eradicate every living being on its surface. Having had our fun playing God, we look to de-stress by playing a few rounds of tennis. All in all, this section of the Great Clock was fairly straightforward, with no real challenging segments to discuss. Back in the Korthos sector, we're confronted by the first of 3 Valkyries. Now based on the hatred displayed in the most recent cutscene, I expected these Valkyries to put up a good fight.
2 seconds later.
I've never been so wrong in my life. You know the drill by this point. A new sector means more moons to clear out, and as much as I'd like to cope and say they had gotten more difficult to complete, the fact that I was able to walk through most of these enemies with a few burps from my toad here confirmed that we were still undeniably him. Having flown around the sector for a good while, it was undeniable that we'd come across the Agorian Battleplex at some point, which is essentially this game's iteration of the battle arenas of previous entries. We've never been one to back down from a challenge, although calling the Bronze Tournament a challenge would be quite the overstatement. Even the boss hardly puts up a fight, as he couldn't seem to distinguish us from the pools of lava surrounding the arena. With our newly acquired funds, we stopped by the armor vendor where we picked up the Thermoflux armor before making a beeline for Lumos. On paper, this planet isn't too spooky, but upon landing, we learn of the most terrifying enemies to date, Tetramites. Not only are these things invincible, their sole purpose for existing is to feed off the flesh of any living organism, wringing poor victims dry within seconds. Their only weakness is water, which thank god there's plenty of in this first section, although hanging from this pole with a million scarab-like things snipping at our nether regions isn't for the faint-hearted. Having just narrowly avoided what many would consider to be the worst possible way to die, we're immediately thrown into a full-blown war in which we needed to annihilate numerous beast-riding commandos. The silver lining here is that we just picked up the Plasma Striker, which allowed us to zoom in on targets from the next galaxy over. With that said, it did require an overly precise trigger finger, as hitting anything but the weak point might as well have been healing them. It was a tough and drawn out battle, but we did barely manage to hold on as we ended things by clapping the cheeks of a rider who had been twerking for his freedom. All that remained now was... you gotta be fucking kidding me. As if twerking Adorian riders weren't exhausting enough, we now had to deal with 2 Hydra tanks that had just been dropped off on our foreheads. It's a good thing these Hydra tanks were designed in the Stone Ages, as their attack patterns were extremely rudimentary. Even so, following their destruction, we're finally able to rest. What in the fuck is actually going on? If I didn't know any better, I'd think we were stuck in a literal world war, as we'd spent what felt like a whole ass millennia on this one battlefield with no end in sight. With that notion in mind, we made sure to dust off these fighter jets, causing the remaining troops to retreat in fear. Unfortunately, this battle caused some astronomical damage to the homes of many civilians, although it didn't seem like a single one of them truly gave a real fuck. Either way, we're given the Omni Soaker in return for saving their town, which allows us to slurp up any liquid we wish. Sus comments aside, the main fluid we're sucking up is water, which we can then shoot inside these hydro plants. The benefits don't stop there though, as we're also able to suck up this weird honey, which just so happens to be the Tetramite's favourite dish. With that in mind, we can use it as bait to deal with these tentacles. Doing so opens up the path to another Zonai bot, as well as a golden bolt further down the line. By this point, we collected a good few Zonai, meaning Aphelion was only going to get stronger, a fact that was soon proven as we blitzed our way through the Tombly barrier without struggle. Xanathar was a fairly mixed bag in terms of difficulty. You had your wide open areas that we had no problem sniping in, but then there were numerous tight corridors where I had no choice but to break it down, as the claustrophobic halls made dodging random gunfire a seemingly impossible task. At one point, I noticed the stray holoplan peeped, but with no way to get back to our desired location, I had no choice but to take a tactical death to guarantee our respawn point. Having been reminded how strong the Groovatrons were, I made sure to abuse the fuck out of them as we eliminated every robot in sight. Our main goal when visiting the planet was to shut down the containment grid blocking our path to the mysterious portal, and having done that, we stepped through it to find ourselves back in the past. As exciting as this was, I couldn't help but feel disappointed as I hadn't memorized any lottery winning numbers. Either way, we had more pressing matters to attend to, namely planting seeds that would ultimately end up growing into massive vines that somehow carried us all the way to this unreachable area. With our new ice bending abilities, we made short work of the robots guarding these civilians, and after slurping up a gallon of oil, we were able to escort them back to the mainland. As thanks for rescuing their people, we were rewarded with a large sum of fuck all.
Why are you running?
Furious, we made our way back into the past as we looked for a way to crush their spirits. Now, given the fact that they were all nefarious meat riders at this point, defeating him would likely kill two birds with one stone. With that said, just because we're in the past doesn't mean Nefarious isn't without his brain-dead robot army. But as is the case in the present, the enemies in the past couldn't hold a candle to us, and before we knew it, we watched as Nefarious got continuously rage-baited by Corvus, ultimately resulting in his grand escape. In an attempt to end him for good, we drop a grenade on his forehead, only to learn that he'd gone through some explosion therapy himself. As any Time Lord will tell you, interfering with the past in such a way always has its consequences, and in Dr. Nefarious's case, it was having to spend the night with one of the Valkyries. For us, however, it meant the capture of General Alistair. The only downside of this was the fact that he was the only one who knew how to reach Clank, which meant we'd have to formulate yet another rescue plan, which mainly involved destroying everything in our sights. This included Lord Lamerson, who apparently enjoyed getting his ass handed to him so much that he wished to have it done all over again. The challenges to follow had us weaving through a laser circuit, jumping over some more lasers, before moving even more lasers. Fucking hell, they really need to add some variety to their defensive measures. Eventually we got around to freeing the general, although doing so didn't come without its fair share of issues. For one, Alistair's ego couldn't accept the fact that he'd been rescued by us, and in a display of defiance, he refused to move from this elevator. Unfortunately for him, the game's code insisted that he download the flight log data regardless of where he was, and after destroying this gauntlet of enemies, he flew off as if he never threw a temper tantrum in the first place. Before heading off to the Benelia sector, I took it upon myself to revisit old planets and moons in the hopes of collecting the rest of the Zonai. Along the way, we also made sure to pick up any golden bolts that we had missed. As our collectathon continued, Clank seemed to be making decent progress towards the center of the Great Clock. The combat as always was fairly easy, but what became painfully obvious was the fact that my IQ wasn't nearly high enough to figure out some of these puzzles. Through sheer determination alone, we managed to pole vault over this obstacle only to arrive at another mnemonic station. It's in this very scenario where we learned how powerful the plumber really is. I mean, he has no business being inside our brain, let alone being the one to give us life-changing advice. Even so, he gives us a nice boost, which we translate into conquering the rest of this section. Back with Ratchet, we're once again ambushed by yet another Valkyrie as we enter this new sector, and much like her sister, she goes down quite easily. From here, we continue to visit some moons, collect some golden bolts, get stuck in a fucking platform with which we're forced to die, and my favourite of all, phasing through said platform altogether. Having been royally fucked by the surrounding moons, I wasn't at all confident when entering Vapedia's orbit. That being said, the opening section of this planet isn't too bad. There's a few cool hoverboot sections, and the enemies present here can't exactly handle the shocking power of our new weapons. This surprisingly transferred on over to the Valkyries as well, who were quite literally sitting ducks the moment our magnetic launcher hit them. You'd think the winged Valkyries would be rather problematic, but for whatever reason, they had this terrible habit of flying over massive gaps. With our army being whittled down little by little, Cassiopeia knew she had to do something, thus the Valkyrie trials were derived, and it was up to us to complete them. The first of these trials had us picking up flaming balls and chucking them back into this cannon's holes. The second had us contracting chlamydia as we zoomed around the room activating switches, while the third trial had us chasing after an orgy of battery bots in the hopes of powering open this door. All of this culminated in a final face-off against the thickest Valkyrie of all, and while many would consider her being airborne a challenge, the real challenge was completing this fight with only one hand. With her defeated, we get drilled by General Alistair, who seemed salty he didn't get to have a shot at the Valkyries himself. Annoyed, he suggests using the time controlling capabilities of the Great Clock to rewind to the point before we defeated her. But as Clank reiterated, some risks just aren't worth taking. With so much on our minds, I decided to revisit a few planets in the hopes of completing their skill points. This saw us vandalizing this nice village, decimating everyone's luggage at the airport so that it won't arrive with them, as well as losing our minds as we spent a few centuries tracking down hidden boxes in the Krell Canyon. Our adventures weren't without misfortune, however, as we not only got crushed by this food processor, but we also got our asses kicked thinking we were all that in the arena challenges. Ironically enough, it was only after these deaths that our mind finally cleared, and we realized that Clank was wrong all along. If we used the time machine to our advantage, every lottery in the universe would be at our mercy.
That's not entirely accurate.
And with that in mind, we tracked a one-way course towards Nefarious' space station. Now you'd expect Nefarious' space station to be heavily guarded, but honestly, it wasn't too bad, especially considering a lot of the guards sat around waiting to be sniped. Eventually, we met up with Quark, who, still dressed in his nurse outfit, tells us of his master plan to sneak into Mission Control and eviscerate Nefarious' army without ever being discovered. Now, as inspiring as that plan sounds, there was just one problem. Quark was one of the worst actors to ever grace the universe.
Dr. Nefarious is expecting us.
You are not authorized. Prepare to die, Nurse Shannon.
With our cover immediately blown, we had no choice but to mash the fuck out of our controller in the hopes of blasting our way towards the control room. Without us realizing, Clank had somehow managed to climb into the sewerage vent, which led him straight to Dr. Nefarious, and using his 20/20 vision, he was able to scan Nefarious and impart his data straight into our skeletal structure. This unfortunately came with the byproduct of looking like Dr. Nefarious, but it did mean we could shout out one of the worst voice lines in gaming history.
Lawrence!
Yes, sir.
Lawrence! Lawrence!
Regrettably, our screaming was so painful to the ears of everyone present that it started a riot in these quarters in which we had to fight our way out of. This ultimately ended in us being captured by the real Nefarious, and for once he doesn't waste any time in getting rid of us. Now, despite all the armor upgrades we bought over the years, the strongest and most effective armor still remains the plot armor, as we somehow tanked being slingshotted across the galaxy on a meteor. One thing led to another, and before we knew it, we were stuck in yet another chaotic battlefield against Agorian troops who honestly gave a fuck ton of weapon XP. This ultimately led to a fight against the commander of the army, who honestly was a complete joke. It's also here where we find our last Rhino 5 holoplan, and after returning to the smuggler in Axiom City, we're given the Rhino 5 as a reward. With this super powered weapon in our hands, we look to tackle the Corvus sector, where we demonstrate once again just how dogshit our platforming skills are. Bro, what the fuck even happened there? Even so, we do end up collecting the last zone I bought here, before returning to Nefarious' space station for some much needed revenge. The fight against Dr. Nefarious is an interesting one, because the hardest part isn't even directly related to the fight, rather this random ass grind rail section in the middle of it. I don't even know why this part was so hard, I just seemed to fly off the rails, pun intended, at the most random of times. I must have flung myself off into the cosmos 3 times before finally putting Nefarious in his place, although knowing we'd saved the galaxy once again was definitely worth the deaths. With that said, even with Nefarious defeated, there remained one last obstacle. See, General Alistar remained hellbent on reviving the Valkyrie Queen, while we wanted to use it to abuse the lottery. Seeing as we couldn't see eye to eye, Alistar looked to eradicate us from existence, and if it wasn't for Clank's quick thinking, he would have succeeded. Having essentially been brought back from the dead, we used this chance to prove to General Alistar that he was indeed a failure and deserved to be banished. Now, despite those strong words, the fight against General Alistar is no joke, as this guy is incredibly tanky. His only shortcomings, strangely enough, are his attacks, as they're not nearly as threatening as you'd think. Having exhausted our entire arsenal on this guy's forehead, we do eventually take him down, although unfortunately, the collateral damage resulting from our fight had caused the clock to overheat. With the end of the franchise upon us, Insomniac once again came to the rescue. Disguised once again as General Alistar, they were able to pull out some absolute BS where the clock's handle could be replaced by a simple Omni-wrench, ultimately stopping the collapse of time itself. The game ends with us dropping the whole Caretaker of Time role onto this poor janitor bot as we fly off into the cosmos once again. Now, unlike Tools of Destruction, we didn't immediately jump into challenge mode, as I figured most of these skill points would be far easier to collect on our current playthrough. Again, because of the sheer number of them, I'm not going to discuss every skill point, rather the ones that gave me the most struggle. And ironically enough, the hardest ones all seem to stem from Battleplex challenges, the worst of which requiring us to complete falls without taking a single hit. It didn't matter what strategy I used, I just couldn't get past the fact that a random bullet could spawn inside my asshole and ruin everything. It wasn't until I'd upgraded the Chip-O-Matic to its ultimate form that I was able to pass this challenge with ease. Alongside this, we spent some time getting devoured by these fuckers before returning to Gimlick Valley, where we farmed the shit out of these Agorian warriors before ending ourselves to do it all over again. This was by far the quickest way to level up our weapons to their max level, as these warriors gave an ungodly amount of weapon XP. With all of our weapons at max level, all that remained was to clap Alistar's cheeks once again. With all the Zonai bots, golden bolts, rhino plants and skill points collected, we had officially 100%ed a Kraken time. And with only 18 deaths to our name, I'd say it was a fairly pathetic run. With that said, we've got one last adventure to run through. An adventure that immediately starts with a roadblock. As a famous man once said though, if you don't let your game files install, then you'll be slammed through a door. So there I sat, patiently waiting for this dumb shit to load. In the years it took for this game to load, we learned that the gang had been tasked with a rather historic mission in which they had to transport the galaxy's most toxic e-data. This girl was so unhinged that she threw constant temper tantrums that were strong enough to send shockwaves throughout our ship. And considering we'd just completed an apprenticeship in construction, it was up to us to repair the damage done. As competent as we were, however, we couldn't manage this type of workload alone, meaning we had to wake up the gang in the only way we saw fit. With the gang awake, we could now focus on making our way towards the main source of our problems, Vendra Prog. Thankfully, she's been contained in a force field that's said to be impenetrable, and despite her seduction attempts, we calmly managed to lock her back in place. Despite all that, it just so happened that her brother had hired a group of mercenaries with the sole purpose of rescuing Vendra. The idea of failing our very first escort mission didn't exactly sit quite well with us, as we did everything in our power to return to the ship. Although even after entering it, it didn't seem like the game had any intention of letting us succeed. With otherworldly forces to deal with alongside these new crocodile gangsters, you could say our work was cut out for us, especially since we'd for whatever reason downgraded back to 2 basic ass weapons. Even so, we utilised our weapons to perfection, ultimately wiping the floor with the crocs out of water. Unfortunately, it seems our efforts were in vain, as Vendra had somehow already been freed from the force field, which was said to be impenetrable.
So that was a fucking lie.
To make matters worse, our gang had apparently thought that they were the main characters, which stupidly ended in them getting captured. The good news, however, is that we were the main character, and with plot armor on our side, anything was possible. Having been caught in Vendra's ultimate ability, we're forced to watch in horror as these 2 idiotic robots are obliterated before our very eyes. As saddening as their passing was, they really only had themselves to blame, and with that thought in our mind, our focus turned to getting revenge on the Prog siblings. First things first though, we had to jump our way across these conveniently placed gravity pads, which led us straight to an enemy vessel. With our main ship blown to smithereens, we had no choice but to hitch a ride on the ship, although concerningly, we had no idea where it would lead. Truthfully though, it didn't matter where we landed, as we'd realised we'd left our whole toolkit back on the ship. Depressed, it wasn't until Talywin promised to buy us another set that we felt eager enough to explore this mysterious planet, which was far harder than I initially thought, as all I could do in this moment was marvel at how sexy this game looked. Glazing aside, we platformed our way through the local area while narrowly avoiding the magnitude 8 earthquakes. Eventually, we stumbled across a loser getting bullied by some thugs, and while we couldn't care less about the situation, I could tell the nerd was holding onto something intriguing. As expected, upon saving him, he handed over the grav tether, which can be used to create grav streams. Not only do these allow us to move around the planet with ease, they also provide some of the best elevator music the universe has to offer. Using it, we're able to float our way over to the main section of the island, where we discover that we're not exactly alone on this planet. Granted, the crocodile bosses aren't exactly the toughest enemies to defeat. While exploring this starting area, we did come across our first golden bolt, only to follow it up with another one not long after. Golden bolts weren't the only things we found here, however, as we soon stumbled across our second rhino plan. Our main goal, apart from vanquishing these crocodile bastards, was to find Pollock, as he was the apparent punching bag of the Prog twins. With so much ground to cover, however, it was anyone's guess where he'd be, although knowing them, any environment closely resembling a mum's basement would be our first guess. Realizing that we were his only hope at freedom, he promptly supercharges Clank's cheeks, which somehow granted him the ability to crack open rifts to the netherworld, which for whatever reason are completely two-dimensional in nature. With that said, our main goal when entering these rifts is to wake the lazy fucker at the end of them before luring them back to the entrance. Considering this is the first one, it's not too hard, but trust me when I say that these can get quite ridiculous, especially with regards to certain skill points. Continuing on, we clear out our second rift before learning that Vendra had been seen at her orphanage not too long ago. As we swingshot ourselves across these islands, we stopped in at the local vendor where we purchased one of my favourite weapons to date. Not only does this weapon make everyone in a 10-meter vicinity shit their pants, it's also a useful taunt as it draws the attention of most of the enemies in the area. As we approach the orphanage, we're ambushed by what I'm guessing is the first boss of the game, although considering we beat his ass with just our wrench, I'd say boss doesn't quite suit him. Either way, with him out of the way, we strolled into the orphanage only to end up in the basement, which had been infested by these chlamydia-infected creatures. Before long, we'd found another rift to close, which by this point was still incredibly easy to complete. Following this, we do indeed catch up with the Prog twins, who somehow had gotten their hands on a Dimensionator. Using it, they're able to crack open a window, allowing Vendra some valuable time with her E-Date. As wholesome as this meeting was, it did come with its fair share of complexities, namely the fact that it allowed an army of nether creatures to enter this world, creatures that we would end up fighting as we struggled to deal with their constant teleportation abilities. Thankfully, it seems as though even creatures from the netherworld could shit their pants as we abused the fuck out of the nightmare box to defeat them. Having escaped the caves, we're rescued by Quark in what may be the first useful thing he's ever done as he drops us off to Aphelion. With our ship back in our possession, we look to tell the Prog twins who had made their way over to the planet Psylocke. Before any of that though, how could they butcher my open space exploration hub worlds like this? Like, this is complete arse.
Time to stop!
Complaining aside, we land in Psylocke where we pick up our first armor upgrade. Despite it being a new area, I still look to abuse the fuck out of the Nightmare Box, which by this point had become my favourite weapon by far. As we made our way through the streets, I kept a keen eye out for golden bolts, which were hidden in some rather interesting locations. Before long though, we'd ended up in the drainage system where we accidentally released the emergency water supplies. With our lives on the line, we ascended up these conveniently placed platforms as the crocodiles underneath us succumbed to the water. Rather than swim, it seems as though these crocodiles preferred to fly, as they were soon swarming above us with their jetpacks. With their numbers whittling down though, they had no choice but to send in the big dogs, who despite having a boss health bar, still shit themselves in the presence of our nightmare boxes. Unfortunately, it seems we couldn't progress further into the city without claiming a gadget from Destructopalooza, so off to Planet Crag we went, where we blitzed our way through the bronze challenges without struggle. Like always though, our sheer dominance in the earlier arena challenges always gets to my head, and before long, I'm getting humbled during the final silver challenge. With my ego back in the dumps once again, we returned to Psylocke where we used our new jetpacks to flex on all the idiots stuck on the ground. While doing so, we activated a few wrench screws which drained out the water which was blocking the entrance leading down into the sewerage tunnels. Now as strange a destination as this was, it did hide some rather important items, although the only memory I have of this area is getting absolutely clapped by this water. What we're supposed to do here is fly our way out of this shithole using our jetpack, although for whatever reason, the engineers who built this system decided to put in these cancerous fans just to slow down our progress. Alas, having escaped these sewerage pipes, we return to the surface where these assholes will use any opportunity to try and get some free damage in. Defeating them, we walk our way into a no-fly zone, or at least that's what we're supposed to hear. Me on the other hand, didn't realize this had happened, and without a care in the world, I attempted to fly our way around in hopes of finding more hidden secrets. Yeah, I think I'm fucked here. Embarrassing deaths aside, we looked to cover ourselves by clearing another rift, although the only thing this did was bait out our subpar IQ. Following these unfortunate situations, our self-esteem had taken quite a hit, which honestly couldn't have come at a worse time as we're then confronted by Nefton Prog. He admittedly baits out the fact that he has a sister complex, and realizing we were going to snitch on his ass, looked to flatten us. Unluckily for him though, we had access to the best weapon in the game, and despite looking rather intimidating himself, even he couldn't stand up to the horrors hidden inside these boxes. Having spent the last 5 minutes watching her brother get his ass kicked, Vendra pussied out of a fight herself, instead looking to open the nether portals in the hopes of meeting her e-boyfriend. For whatever reason, Vendra here couldn't see the coming betrayal, despite it being one of the most obvious plot points to ever exist. The final nail in the coffin, however, came after this whale admitted to her that she wasn't his type at all. Thankfully, the breakdown of this relationship gave us enough time to retreat back to our ship, although we made sure to aura farm just enough to re-establish ourselves as the main character. With another whale terrorizing the universe, there was only one solution, and awkwardly, it required the help of Nefton Prog. He supposedly had a base located on a planet called Thram, although the only person we seemed to find here was our very own stalker. He once again tasked us with the collection of some monster horns, but what he forgot to tell us was that they belonged to some abnormally large creatures, and while they're a sight for sore eyes, they too were no match for our nightmare boxes. I feel like you guys are seeing a trend here. It wasn't long before the ecosystem of this planet was on its last legs, as we plastered anything that moved. With 10 horns in hand, we exchanged them for a pair of hoverboots, which allowed us to reach the deeper parts of the jungle. With that said, there was an even better reward, although it required the complete extinction of these massive creatures. After obtaining another 30 horns, our stalker here lets us refuel at his petrol station, thus giving us complete freedom to roam the skies of this jungle. It's only after we get access to the jetpack that we're able to reach certain areas like this Rhino Holoplan, but more importantly, a few of the golden bolts. While exploring the surrounding areas, we also managed to stumble across the smuggler's dumbass parrot, although it was clear that the smuggler couldn't give two shits about him, as our reward for rescuing him only amounted to a few thousand bolts. In the end though, our main goal for coming here was to locate Prog's hidden hideout, which was something we achieved by complete accident. What was even more surprising, however, was just how well Prog was able to disguise himself, as we spent an awkwardly long time knocking on this door, not realizing he was behind us the entire time. After making our way inside, we learned that Prog here couldn't care less about his sister, and instead wished to visit the museum on Igliak, as he had never been before. Unfortunately, he did not help to get in, as the chaos caused by his sister had resulted in them getting lifelong bans. Feeling sorry for him, we agreed to help him sneak in, but not before we found every key part to unlocking this safe. We also made sure to grab any remaining golden bolts while we were here, as the last thing we wanted to do was to contract a virus from the supposed life-threatening leeches that lived here. Having collected the final key piece, we're able to return to the smuggler, who warns us about the disappointment waiting inside the safe. Not wanting to believe him, we move over to the safe only to be immediately disappointed with its contents. It took an unbelievable amount of self-restraint to not obliterate this dumbass plumber on the spot. And noticing his life hanging in the balance, he promised to build us an otherworldly weapon, as long as we found the blueprints for him. In an attempt to blow off some steam, we made our way back to the battle arena, where we eviscerated the silver tournament's boss. From here, we spent some time earning a few of the skill points tied with these arena challenges, which saw us beating the Progbot without taking any damage, as well as embarrassing a whole unit of enemies as we turned them into snowmen. Considering we were in the completionist mood, following the domination we just displayed, we made our way back to Silex, where we got far too cocky attempting to fly above this water. Furious, we engaged in some light demolition, before spending a whole hour sentry hunting down some goddamn mirrors in what I can only imagine was some saddest idea of fun. We finished up by flying through the sewerage section without refueling, meaning it was finally time to revisit this museum. What I hadn't realized before coming here though was that this museum featured interactive experiences, namely killer robots that wanted you dead. Also, I'm not sure what this tourbot has been smoking, but there's no shot you can see these fucking turtles from space.
And are so big they can be seen from space.
Stop the cap.
Despite this, we were thoroughly enjoying this experience to the point where we'd completely forgot about helping Neft and Prog sneak in. It was only after we discovered a replica Dimensionator that we truly understood why Neftin had asked us to explore the museum. As thanks for such a great experience, however, we just decided to let him have it, as there were more pressing matters to attend to. It seems the Purple Whale knew the Dimensionator was here, as he conducted a full-on raid of Meridian City. What he hadn't realized, however, was the fact that we'd just purchased the Nether Beast, meaning his army was getting bodied by its very own kind. In between the cannibalistic fighting segments, we made sure to pick up our final golden bolt, as well as the final rhino piece as well. All that remained now was to defeat this whale, although first we had to dodge some peak hour traffic. Having earned yet another skill point on our first attempt, our confidence going into this final battle was sky high, a factor that wasn't at all required as this boss battle was laughably easy. The only attack of his that I found somewhat hard was this massive slash attack, and I'm just going to cope and say the hitboxes are massive to the point where you can get caught despite jumping at what I thought was the perfect time. In between each phase, we were required to enter a few rifts in an attempt to free Vendra, and while these were certainly the hardest so far, it never got to the point where we struggled to pass them. Seeing as we were beating this thing's non-existent ass with its own kind, the game had to start pulling some absolute bullshit to make this fight seem harder than it truly was. Even so, we ended what may go down as the shortest invasion in galactic history, as we ended up clapping Mr. I here. With him down for the count, this gives Neftin just enough time to open up a wormhole to the pits of hell, ultimately banishing him back to where he came from. Having felt bad for lying to us, Neftin agrees to turn himself in, and despite Vendra's insistence that they did nothing wrong, we had been filming this entire playthrough as evidence. The game ends with us being bummed out, as once again, we're unable to use the Dimensionator to find the rest of our kind. Although considering this cheeky move pulled by Clank, who knows what the future holds. Before starting challenge mode this time around, I decided to cash in the Plumber's Promise, which resulted in us obtaining the Rhino for the 27th time. Tragically, the Rhino was completely worthless when it came to completing the toughest skill points this game had to offer, as they were directly related to the Rift puzzles. For each of these puzzles, there are 3 skill points, a time related one, a damage related one in which we're not allowed to take any damage, and most concerningly, ones that require you to beat each puzzle in a limited number of moves. For the most part, the damageless runs were easy enough, and the large majority of the time ones followed this trend as well. Where it got ridiculous, however, was when we're given 10 moves to complete a whole ass puzzle. This is made even worse when you realise that certain challenges give you absolutely zero leeway, meaning one wrong movement and you're back to the drawing board. I don't even want to know how many times I failed these Rift challenges while going for these skill points, but I know for a fact that it was far more than the total number of times I died playing through the game's story. Outside of these skill points, the remaining ones weren't too bad. Eventually though, we had to start challenge mode, as there were a few missable skill points directly linked with the opening act on planet Yerek. Even so, they weren't too bad to acquire, and after dropping these idiots off into the rift below, we had officially earned every skill point this game had to offer. All we really had left to do now was to level each weapon to their max Omega level, which I achieved by farming the same group of crocodiles over and over again. Now while this method was somewhat effective, it didn't work for every weapon, with the smaller much larger groups of enemies on Thram for example being much more viable when looking to level our snow cone maker. Following this, we completed the new Platinum Arena challenges before abusing Mr. I's massive health bar to level up our Rhino. I would often let Mr. I incinerate me with his beam, although I won't be counting these as actual deaths as I wanted to restart the fight and farm him once again. After another few minutes of grinding, we had officially earned the Off Your Arsenal trophy, meaning we had finally maxed out all of our weapons. We then dumpstered Mr. I once again, completing challenge mode in the process. Following this, we paid one last visit to the jungle of Thram, where we abused the presence of our snowmaker to farm enough bolts for the final set of armor, finally earning us that elusive 100%. This leaves us with one final adventure, an adventure that wouldn't start for another 8 years. A period of time so vast that Ratchet and Clank had seemingly been replaced by a mysterious figure that couldn't stand out more if she tried.
Your suit seems to be working nicely, blending right in.
Stop the cap!
By some miracle, this pathetic disguise allowed her to steal a spy bot that contained the winning lottery numbers for the galaxy's next lotto. Unfortunately, before she even had the chance to write them down, she witnessed a fellow thief being chased down, and considering how passionate she was about theft, there was no way in hell she was about to let this young disciple die. Aura farming aside, this may have been the dumbest decision she'd ever made, as not only did she end up giving over her helmet, which had recently gone up a few million on eBay, moments later she'd been surrounded by a whole entourage of enemy robots. With her story well and truly over, we reunite with their lovable duo, who are currently going through a midlife crisis of their own.
What if everyone thinks we're washed up? Oh, what if we are washed up?
Thankfully, it seems the 8-year wait didn't faze the masses as they continuously glazed us as we made our way through the tutorial stage of the game. Granted, because it's a tutorial, there isn't much here to discuss. We essentially learn how to melee, jump and shoot during this section, and while there are a few goons to take out here and there, it's not like we have a galactic threat on our hands.
What? Dr. Nefarious?
As concerning as this was, it soon became apparent that Dr. Nefarious had booked the exact same holiday period as us, as he'd spent the last 8 years doing fuck all as well. As is the case whenever he shows up though, the festival is thrown into absolute chaos, and despite our best efforts, we're thrown off course, landing at the busiest train station in town. Fortunately, this also happens to be the only train station that legally sells firearms to its passengers, meaning we were able to pick up a few guns for ourselves that we immediately used to clear out the station's security guards. If that wasn't diabolical enough, we then overpowered a literal Dimensionator with our basic ass blaster, once again reiterating just how powerful our plot armor is. Dr. moment, Dr. Nefarious was the least of our worries however, as these splitting dimensions meant all sorts of creatures were ending up in our realm. Our one saving grace in this situation was the fact that we'd somehow found a rift stone lodged inside the station's public toilets while we were taking a dump, and using it we're able to tether to specific rifts, allowing us to cover great distances. With our ego at an all-time high, we made sure everyone at that station knew their place before stumbling across our first bit of raritanium. Like in previous games, this stuff essentially supercharges our weapons, allowing it to gain whole ass abilities somehow. For now though, we stuck to what we knew best, blowing ourselves up. Having given off the perception that we were completely helpless, we were able to draw Dr. Nefarious out, entering into the first boss battle against him. Now, we might have given off the impression that we were too washed, as this idiot started dancing anytime he hit us with an attack. His ego paired with the limited number of attacks his mechs could shoot out made it far too easy to take him down. With the number of ass kickings he'd received now entering the triple digits, Nefarious knew his only chance at ever seeing the victory screen would be in a different dimension, and upon reaching it, we all stand around and watch as the Dimensionator decides to off itself. The resulting shockwaves not only decimate the surrounding cityscape, but warp each of us to different locations. Nefarious by some miracle was sent to his dimensional counterpart's head office, while Ratchet had somehow ended up at the city bar, only to get wasted and find himself knocked out in the city slums. Clank, on the other hand, had finally been given a chance to escape Ratchet's shadow. He was no longer going to be a mere attachment for someone else. Alright, never mind. He's been kidnapped by the same mysterious Lombax from the start of the game. Back with Ratchet, we started to make our way through the slums of the city, only to find out that it's ruled by Nefarious himself. If that wasn't bad enough, we catch a quick glimpse of our Lombax counterpart running off with Clank, and considering we'd just been manhandled by the same troops that she fended off with ease, there was only one thought coursing through our minds. We were no longer the main character. No. With that horrifying realization sinking in, we look to engage in the one activity women have been using to counteract stress for decades: doom spending. Now, despite upgrading our arsenal, to say our confidence was lacking would be an understatement. Fortunately, we had heard news of a spy bot nearby which held important information regarding the current housing market. Like the majority of us, Ratchet here was on the verge of homelessness if he didn't lock down a place of his own, and considering he was out of the job for over 8 years, the only feasible chance he had in this situation was to track down this spy bot and learn its secrets. What we hadn't realized at this point was that this Emperor Nefarious pretty much controlled all aspects of the property market, and upon learning of this spy bot, sent a good few of his troops to exterminate it. These troops included these beam shooting robots that had some incredible range, as well as these brawler type robots whose only goal was to pulverize our only source of childbirth. Granted, we had splurged whatever funds we had remaining in our savings account, which had gotten us some rather powerful weapons. Before long, we'd high-fived our first spy bot, which regrettably had absolutely no information on the property market whatsoever. With that said, it does give us the opportunity to talk about what exactly is required for 100% in A Rift Apart. As you might have gathered, we'll need to high-five all 10 spy bots located throughout the galaxy, although on top of this, we'll need to collect all 25 bolts, find all 12 Lombax Lorbs, obtain all armor set pieces, buy every weapon, and then upgrade them all and level them to their max omega versions. We'll also then need to complete all arena challenges as well as a second playthrough on challenge mode. Surprisingly, this is the first mainline Ratchet & Clank game to not include any skill points, which I thought was rather strange. With that in mind, given our depressive state, I thought it best that we liven ourselves up at the nearest club. As luck would have it though, we'd somehow managed to rock up at the exact moment one of the most notorious vigilantes was getting busted. Wanting that juicy reward bounty for ourselves, we chased down this mysterious figure, decimating Nefarious's pathetic robot army along the way. It's important to note that despite the chaos we've been thrown into, we still need to look out for branching pathways as they often lead to hidden collectibles. With Nefarious's army thinned out, we eventually catch up to this vigilante, who in return for not ratting him out, installs a full functioning vibrator in our arm. Ignoring the crude yet blatant use for such a function, it also allows us to phantom dash out of existence for a short period of time. Not only does this mean we can now sneak into highly secure areas like your local bank, we can also wall run along these specifically placed gravity panels. If I'm being honest, I wasn't sure where this guy was taking it, but let's just say that I wasn't disappointed. To our dismay, it seems Nefarious' troops had commandeered a whole spy area, meaning we once again had to engage in some urban warfare, killing numerous innocent civilians in the process. The worst part, however, was the fact that even after decimating these troops, we didn't even get to do some skinny dipping of our own, as the nearby blimp was incinerated by a flying centipede. Undeterred, we're given a chip that contains a whole new genus of spider, and with her help, we're able to break down Nefarious' shitty firewall, ultimately doxing his love for tentacle hentai in the process. With his greatest secret exposed, Nefarious looked to terminate us for good. Unbeknownst to him, however, we're equipped with our plot armor, meaning we barely escaped at the skin of our teeth in his very own shuttle. Over on the other side of the galaxy, we find ourselves crash landing on Saga in typical Ratchet and Clank fashion. As concerning as this was, the only thing crossing my mind was just how goddamn beautiful this planet looked. Oh, and also the fact that there's no fucking way these dinosaur things can be seen from space. Another thing you may have noticed is the fact that we're now playing as Rivet, Ratchet's dimensional counterpart. In that sense, she's essentially identical, even to the point where she'd somehow got the exact same weapon layout as we did on Nefarious' home base.
What?
Just before crash landing, we'd received a distress call from the sewer rats of this planet, begging for us to come save their leader. While we were happy to oblige, the main challenge we faced was how we were going to traverse this dangerous swamplands of a planet. That's when we somehow stumbled into a pocket dimension that not only housed another armor piece, but the coolest mount to ever exist.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
As fun as riding these Beetles were, our main purpose for coming here was to save the leader of these sewer rats and then blackmail them into repairing our ship. This was easier said than done, however, as we not only had to fight off flying crocodiles, but whole ass Jurassic World rejects. As we worked our way around these swamplands, I made sure to check around every corner, as you never knew what could be hidden there. After making sure the toads of this planet were well and truly extinct, we reached Rivet's home, where she did the worst thing imaginable. She scanned our search history. Luckily for us, we're seasoned veterans of incognito mode, meaning all she saw was the suspiciously intimate photos with Ratchet.
What do you mean by that?
Before we even given a chance to explain ourselves, we're interrupted by this metal centipede, who upon learning of our dirty secrets, looked to secure these spybots as a means of blackmailing us. Rivet, having felt responsible for airing our dirty laundry, looked to give chase, and what better vehicle is there to catch up to this flying behemoth than this random fucking bug? Now, from what I've been told, this beetle can reach speeds of up to 200 km per hour, meaning any enemy in our path is likely to get obliterated upon sight. It also meant that should we hit anything else, we'd almost certainly perish. With our death counts V-card well and truly popped, we managed to mount this massive mechanical slug, and after some vicious backshots, it was down for the count. And by down, I meant down on the ground, ready to blitz our assholes.
Okay, we are cooked.
Now, the actual fight against this mechanized beast wasn't too hard, as despite seeming technologically advanced, he had about 2 attacks he could use, both of which were simple enough to avoid. After a fairly resident battle, we KO the driver only to force the freshly rescued Clank into a new dimension. As confusing as this was, there did seem to be light at the end of the tunnel though, as we weren't the only ones present in this dimension. I mean, surely the sage looking guy knows what's going on.
Where exactly is, here?
Oh, you don't know? Well, I don't either.
As is commonplace in this franchise, it seems we'll have to do all the heavy lifting ourselves, and just like in A Crack in Time, it seems like Clank's sections involve more puzzle solving. Essentially, each of these rooms houses Clank's possibilities, and it's up to us to lead them back to the dinner table so that they're able to feast. This has us collecting multiple orbs like the speed orb, which doesn't exactly make us any faster, as well as the heavy and lift orbs. This first set of puzzles isn't too difficult, although if I'm being honest, none of them hold a candle to the monstrosities in A Crack in Time. Regardless, after closing the meta dimension, we're able to leverage the fact that we saved these furballs into them completely repairing our ship. Before taking over, however, we still had quite a few areas to explore in Sargasso, and given the fact that we now had free reign over the Beetles, I spent the next 30 minutes dashing around the planet only to be hit with some of the most random glitches out there.
What the fuck just happened? Wait, what? Nah, there's no way I'm counting that as a death.
Either way, after completing another pocket dimension and earning some more armor pieces, we charted a course for Xerxes, the safest place in the galaxy to procure some drugs.
What did he say?
In saying that, all we were interested in was obtaining some more golden bolts, as well as relax with some cold hard liquor. Now, considering the dodgy clientele that frequent this bar, it shouldn't come as a surprise that we're instantly hit on by the biggest loser imaginable. This guy is so pathetic in fact, that the moment we challenged him to a duel, he shat his pants. Even after changing his underwear, he still didn't have the balls to take us on, rather pushing his entourage of yes men to what would certainly be their untimely deaths. The arena challenges in this game are pretty much identical to all its predecessors. Each cup has a set of challenges that decrease in difficulty the further into the game we get. With that said, there is one minor change present here that I don't believe was present in the previous game. That being that only the bronze challenges are available for us to complete at this point in the story. In my specific case, this can only be seen as an absolute win, as I have, without fail, tried to complete the silver and gold arena challenges in previous games only to get absolutely humbled. Here though, we just need to complete the easy bronze challenge.
It's been a witness.
I can't lie, these bronze challenges are far tougher than any previous iterations. The speed of time trial is one thing, but Broomstick Blast is surprisingly difficult as we're tasked with taking out 25 goons with the Enforcer. The hardest part of this challenge isn't the actual combat however, it's the fact that we need to move around these platforms constantly, not only to reach our enemies but to resupply on ammo for our guns. All the while we're getting pelted by gunfire from all sides. I was able to pass this challenge on my first attempt, but it didn't necessarily fill me with much confidence going into the tougher cups. On a more positive note, humbling Pierhead had somehow resulted in him giving us what I can only imagine are some of the most diabolical drugs this galaxy has ever seen. Not wanting to risk our own skin, we instead injected into Clank, only to realize that the presumed side effects were in fact positive, as it let Clank communicate with Ratchet despite him being light years away. Granted, we did end up regretting this newfound power the moment Ratchet told us that there were now two Nefariouses that we had to deal with. With space-time being ripped a new arsehole, Clank whipped out his chef hat and cooked up a feasible win condition. The only problem was that it required us to build an entirely new Dimensionator, the same device that had gotten us into this mess in the first place. Clank also mentions that should we waste any time, there's a very good chance we'll all cease to exist. Knowing this, we made our way back to Saga as we'd been asked to help with some optional side quests. Luckily, it didn't seem like we had to spend a long time here, as all that was required was to collect some Viagra for this dragon here. The more we collected though, the more our relationship grew, and before you knew it, we'd become the Queen of Dragons as we soared through the skies hunting down the last of this Viagra. Obtaining all the Viagra on offer didn't just result in us getting the spybot for this planet, but it also allowed us to collect the final golden bolt as it was somehow levitating in the middle of the sky. Having collected all there was to collect on this planet, we instead shifted over to Ratchet, who was touching down in Savali. To our surprise, we meet with Gary, who despite never having met us, also predicted that we'd come to save the day. Not wanting to lose any credibility, we wasted no time clearing out Nefarious's forces who had sieged the nearest town, only to watch in disbelief as the archives we'd been searching for promptly stood up themselves and started walking away. On the bright side, it seemed to shit out the baby version of Bumblebee, who just so happened to be the perfect size to replace Clank. We also pick up some musty hover boots, which we use to dash our way around the open plains of this planet. Now, in order to reach these walking archives, we'll need the help of the monks. The bad news is that these same monks had been captured by Nefarious's forces. Not only that, but they'd have to wait quite a while as we had better things to do, namely collecting these lorbs. See, there are 12 lorbs situated around the area, often requiring us to chase down these strange robots as if they'd stolen our lunch money, or platform our way across some more gravity pads, or fight off some more of Nefario's troops. This further translates into the temples, where the monks are trapped as we blast our way through constant waves of enemies. These were all fairly easy, although there was one temple that required a bit more tech to reach. See, despite their monk friends being captured, we're still forced to complete a trial to reach their temple, a trial that requires us to go fast, but not too fast. Oh my fucking god. I've actually outsped the platforms, they didn't even spawn in. With the monks freed, we're given a clear path to the archives where we're met with even more resistance. With the amount of enemies we're fighting off, you'd think the information contained in these archives matched that of a certain set of files. And while no island seemed to be involved this time around, the fact we were fighting off multiple commandos at once goes to show the damage this could have done should the information come to light. After a grueling battle, we finally gained access to the nefarious files, and let's just say, he'd be cooked should any of this come out. Upon learning this, he sends his entire strike force in an attempt to annihilate us, although unbeknownst to him, Bumblebee Jr. here had a trick up her sleeve. Having been single-handedly carried by this tiny robot, we switch perspectives back to Rivet, who had just touched down in the most visually stunning planet to date. This planet was so majestic that I had almost forgotten why we'd come here in the first place. Our main goal here was to mine some phase quartz, a material so rare that should anyone put it on the stock market, it would immediately crash everything else. As you'd expect, obtaining this quartz wasn't easy, as we not only had to jump between dimensions all while fighting off enemies in both, but we also had to grind rail our way through multiple dimensions just to reach the drill in the first place. Even after reaching the drill, the goddamn thing wasn't even powered up, meaning we then had to fight through a whole ass gauntlet of increasingly difficult enemies. The saddest part of all though was despite succeeding in fending off these enemies, the residual explosions knocks the cancerous drill off course, meaning we were left with the smallest bit of phase quartz possible. If that wasn't bad enough, the malfunctioning drill had apparently cut off the only bit of quartz that had zero energy stored inside it, meaning our only hope was to get repaired by some massive mech on Torren 4. The good news is that it would only take 48 business days to travel from our current location, meaning the universe would only have to mourn the loss of a few galaxies in the meantime.
Nice.
Unfortunately, it seems as though news travels fast, as upon landing in Torren 4, none of the locals wanted anything to do with us. Even the enemy troops who had been dispatched here would rather fling themselves off their own ships than be within 10 meters of us. Granted, this did mean we had easy access to some rather valuable collectibles like this golden bolt as well as another spy bot. With no one willing to stand in our way, it also meant we had free reign to power up this massive mech. As if our luck couldn't get any worse though, it seems as though even this behemoth wasn't too fond of us, as we found ourselves doing everything in our power to avoid being eviscerated by him. Despite our best efforts though, we're eventually caught and crushed between his massive claws.
Wait, what? There's no fucking way we're overpowering this massive fucking mech.
Embarrassed at his lack of muscle mass, the robot here started to power up our phase quartz in the hope of drawing attention away from this pathetic display. With secondhand embarrassment coursing through our veins, we had no choice but to switch perspectives, this time back to Ratchet, who had touched down in Cordelian, in the hopes of forging a whole new Dimensionator. The developers, realizing how cool this whole switching dimensions mechanic was, started to milk the shit out of it, as we found ourselves warping from Jump Scare Central to a forging station that acted as the spawn point for most of Nefarious's forces. I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that this was by far the most stressful planet yet. If we weren't taking part in an orgy with these mechanical fucks, we were shitting ourselves as we ran from this untouchable behemoth. Now, despite my heart rate sitting at a cool 140 during this whole encounter, I did find this underwater section where we got to navigate through the reefs to be fairly calming, even more so when we're collecting golden treasure. It definitely beats dealing with this fucker who continues to jump scare us all the way to the very end. Back in the station, we learned that his hunger for revenge is warranted, as we learned that his girlfriend had been siphoned and used as an energy source for the last few decades. Realizing this would be the perfect opportunity to befriend the Geo, we promptly freed her from her containment unit, only to join forces as we obliterate these commandos. It was also around this point where I reunited with my beloved Doombots, who are unbelievably overpowered. Having freed his girlfriend, we travel back to the abandoned dimension, where we watch them engage in something that we really shouldn't be seeing. As wholesome as this reunion was, we needed them to power up this rusted forge, which somehow resulted in us getting another Dimensionator. Don't ask me how this shit works. I have absolutely no idea. With the Dimensionator in hand, we grab the last remaining golden bolt here before returning to Xerxes as we await Rivet's arrival. Meeting ourselves in a sense wasn't as awkward as I'd first thought it would be. Although that was mainly due to the fact that we were almost immediately seized by Dr. Nefarious. The resulting fight against him was honestly a surprisingly tough one, as we flew from one dimension to another, avoiding falling dinosaurs along the way. The main challenge with regards to this fight can be simplified down to this one attack. For the life of me, I couldn't stop myself from getting my asshole split apart by this attack each and every time. Thankfully, it didn't do an astronomical amount of damage, meaning we could slowly whittle down Nefarious's HP, leading to our eventual victory. As discouraging as that death was, we weren't the only ones getting our asses kicked, as we witnessed Ratchet and Clank get ass blasted into irrelevance as the main man himself descended upon us. This here is Emperor Nefarious, or as I like to call him, Nefarious Pro Max Premium. He's essentially Dr. Nefarious if Dr. Nefarious was even slightly cool or competent. Not only does he have a few inches on Dr. Nefarious, it seems he's unnatural when it comes to using the Dimensionator. With the humbling of a lifetime still slam dunking our confidence, we made sure to get some of it back by rinsing every enemy, Skolo included, in the silver cup. As hopeless as things seemed to be, we had heard whispers in Xerxes' bar about a lone resistance fighter who had recently gotten his cheeks clapped by Nefarious Pro Max Premium. In the hopes of learning his attack patterns, we travelled to Ardolis to find this mysterious figure, although upon landing, the only thing we found was this doofus role-playing some hentai lover's wet dream.
Brother, what's that?
Having ruined Pierre's party, we're banished to the pirate trials as a result, which for the most part are laughably easy. The only challenging section was this glitch one, and ironically enough, it was due to our very namesake.
Bro, what is happening? I can't move. I legit can't move my character. Oh, sick. I'm fucking dead. Oh my god.
Eventually, we came across this supposed resistance fighter, only to realize that it was this dimension's iteration of Quark. Realizing we'd be better off with a feces-covered light bulb, we momentarily locked in as we fought off an endless stream of pirates. This led to us fighting the Twin Tides, although, realistically, I only ever remember fighting one person. With the enemy forces cleared out, we're finally able to sit down with Captain Dogshit here. Unfortunately, before we're able to gather any data on Nefarious Pro Max Premium, he takes it upon himself to find us. With things as they were, it would take an absolute miracle to survive this. A miracle that took the form of Captain Quantum choosing to not be a pussy for the first time in his life. In the hopes of celebrating his passing, we high-fived this spy boss while also collecting any remaining golden bolts on the planet. In the meantime, Rivet had found her way back to Sargasso, which was in the middle of a full-on invasion. With the amount of vehicles and firepower on display, anyone with an IQ above 30 would look at this situation and think it was impossible to overcome. I, on the other hand, saw this as the perfect opportunity to support the notion that my IQ sits within the single-digit range as we mounted stink breaths here and charged headfirst towards these blimps. By some miracle, however, we just so happened to have some bombs laying around, which surprisingly had enough firepower to blitz through the force fields of these blimps, ultimately causing them to collateral into each other and explode. Somehow. Despite this catastrophic victory, we're still the eventual losers as we're upended by Nefarious Pro Max Premium once again. Considering this guy could be everywhere in the blink of an eye, our only hope at beating him seemed to be contained within a map that was said to contain the coordinates that would lead straight to his hentai collection. We'd been told that this map was located back on Savali, information that was instantly proven given the fact that Nefarious' sole entourage of troops were stationed here. By this point in the game though, none of these enemies really posed much of a threat to us, and it seemed as though the developers realized this as well, as they started to add in these random ass skeletal crocs. What they had forgotten to do, however, was raise their HP totals above 1, as a gust of wind seemed to take them out. Now, you'd think defeating all these enemies would result in us finding this goddamn map, but as our luck would have it, it seems as though Nefarious had not only gotten there first, but had taken the map and hidden it himself. Rivet, having predicted this outcome, had already made plans to board Nefarious' flagship. What we hadn't planned for, however, was having to face his massive juggernaut. Yet as intimidating as this guy was, he didn't exactly have the moveset required to put up a decent fight. Upon reaching the top of this area, we brace ourselves as we attempt to KO Nefarious with one single strike. To our surprise, however, it's not Nefarious who we meet, but Gary, who relays to us that he'd been captured following his shenanigans which saw him hiding the dimensional map. With a lifeline to hold onto, we tap back in as Ratchet, who after fighting through countless skeletal crocs, activated the galaxy's strongest drill, creating a pathway into the catacombs. These catacombs contain the final glitch section, which is arguably the hardest one yet, only because it's so fucking easy to get lost in here.
Bro, where the fuck am I?
Awkwardly enough, this section isn't even required to beat the game, although it does open the doors to a golden bolt. The rest of the catacombs lead to an epicenter where we need to send an army of undead creatures back into their graves.
This is easier done than said,
as again, these skeletal enemies are less durable than a piece of toilet paper that's been drenched in water. With another battle behind us, all that remained was to fix the final dimensional anomaly as Clank, which admittedly took my dumbass self a decent amount of time to figure out. With the anomaly cleared, the dimensional map was ours for the taking, or at least we thought so.
Hi.
To say things would die would be an understatement, as even the juiced up Bumblebee couldn't stand up to the powers of the Dimensionator. Having been left on her own, Rivet knew her best bet would be to travel to Zordoom prison, as Nefarious had locked up a great deal of powerful soldiers. As you'd expect, however, the prison was heavily fortified with countless mechs, although for whatever reason, they still spammed the exact same attacks they've been shooting since the start of the game. This made taking them down almost too easy, and before you knew it, we were at the main control station, which we used to control every prisoner's cell. Granted, the idea of setting murderers free was probably one of the worst ideas we'd ever had, although unfortunately, it was a necessary one if we wanted any chance of defeating Nefarious Pro-Max Premium. For now, the prisoners we'd freed saw us as their savior, and with their help, we managed to set Ratchet and Bumblebee free from their cell. With the fate of the whole universe in our hands, we stopped by at Xerxes where we took part in the Gold Cup challenges. These, funnily enough, were the easiest set of challenges out of the whole bunch, and upon completing the last gauntlet, were rewarded with our final piece of armor. Following this, we made sure to upgrade as many weapons as we could with our remaining Raritanium before talking to Captain Dipshit, who knew of a way to reach the two Nefariouses. This saw us flying into Megalopolis, which had been fragmented by dimensional shifted structures. This was it. All our hard work up to this point was for this very moment. The moment we could hand Nefarious Pro-Max Premium his first L. Before that though, we had to deal with this last group of enemies, which, credit to them, gave a decent amount of weapon experience. With this realization in mind, I decided to farm this area for a bit before taking on the final battle. This saw me clearing out the large majority of enemies before throwing myself off the edge to reset them all. This helped tremendously in leveling a good portion of our weapons to their max base game levels. With that said, we really couldn't afford to spend the next few hours doing this, as the universe was rapidly crumbling around us, and with that in mind, we finally grew enough balls to confront Nefarious himself.
We need your help. Nefarious just...
Okay, we are cooked.
This fight, like all boss fights, takes place over multiple phases, the first of which sees us fighting off this massive mechanical mech version of Nefarious. Strangely, it seems as though Nefarious was nervous to engage us head on, as he'd prefer to send his mech past through dimensional portals to reach us. This ultimately made things easier for us, as all we needed to do was focus on one area at a time. After depleting his health bar, we're shot into the mech's heart, where our only goal is to flatline the shit out of it. With this mech destroyed, Nefarious has no choice but to open up his portals to every conceivable dimension, in what I can only imagine is a pitiful attempt at recreating the end scene of Avengers Endgame. With that said, this phase is by far the hardest, as again, Nefarious has this annoying dash attack that I can never seem to dodge. Alongside this, Nefarious will constantly spawn in groups of enemy mechs, which honestly tests your ammo conservation more than anything else. There were a few close calls, but we did eventually defeat him on our first attempt. Although if we're being honest, it was technically Dr. Nefarious who defeated him, as he personally kicked his own counterpart into eternal doom before promptly KOing himself in typical autistic fashion. With the universe saved once again, there remained but one goal: play through the game once again in challenge mode. See, while our save file insinuates that we've already achieved 100%, it only seems to count the story mode objectives as well as all the collectibles. By this point, we'd collected every golden bolt, spy box and Lombax lore. We'd also completed all the arena challenges and obtained every piece of armor. That, paired with the lack of any skill points, meant that the only thing we needed to do to achieve 100% was to buy the Omega versions of every weapon and level them up to V10. This wasn't as bad as I initially expected, as the arena challenges in this game give a considerable amount of experience, especially the boss fights. This was pretty much all I did for hours on end. To help speed things up, I did end up turning on infinite ammo, which is a modifier that we unlock as the reward for collecting golden bolts. I didn't turn on infinite health as I still wanted to record any deaths I experienced, although if we're being honest, the only thing killing us at this point was my terrible platforming skills. It did take some time, but we did manage to get every single weapon to V10, meaning all that remained was to clap Nefarious Pro-Max Premium's cheeks once again, which was a complete cakewalk the second time around. The game once again finishes with us looking out into the distance, hoping and praying that we won't have to wait another 10 years for the next game to release. With every mainline game 100%ed, all that remains is to answer the question posed at the start of the video: which Ratchet & Clank game truly is the hardest to 100%? Well, in my case, this is how the games lined up. To no one's surprise, I'm sure, Quest for Booty easily takes the spot as the easiest Ratchet & Clank game, purely based on the fact that my toilet trips take longer to complete than this game. On the other side though, with a whopping 43 deaths, is going commando. Now some of this could be chalked up to the fact that I started to get better at the games later on, but I did wait a good 6 months in between sagas to hopefully dull my skills back down to their dog shit standards. Either way, in the grand scheme of things, does this question even matter? I mean, of course it fucking does. What, you think I just went through all that effort just so you guys could be like, nah, that doesn't
All joking aside, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do drop a like and consider subscribing. Thank you to all my channel members as usual. Your support means the world to me, and I hope to see you all in the next one.